Episode 20 of the WildFed podcast, Talkin' Turkeys, a beginner's guide to turkey hunting with Carter Heath, is brought to you by Surthrival. Now's the time to fortify your immune system with scientifically validated nutrients, functional foods, and herbal medicines that give you confidence and peace of mind. Colostrum is one of Surthrival's flagship products and is an antiviral functional food I use daily in my morning blended drinks. There's a study hosted on PubMed called Prevention of Influenza Episodes with Colostrum compared with vaccination in healthy and high-risk cardiovascular subjects. The following is from the abstract. I quote, "The efficacy of a 2-month treatment with oral colostrum in the prevention of flu episodes compared with anti-influenza vaccination was evaluated. Groups included healthy subjects without prophylaxis and those receiving both vaccination and colostrum. After 3 months of follow-up, the number of days with flu was 3 times higher in the non-colostrum subjects. Colostrum, both in healthy subjects and high-risk cardiovascular patients, is at least 3 times more effective than vaccination to prevent flu and is very cost-effective." Close quote. Additionally, check out Surthrival's other immune-building formulas, like their D3K2, that's vitamin D3 from lanolin, and vitamin K2 from Japanese natto. And also have a look at their reishi and chaga dual-extracted medicinal mushroom formulas. Both of these mushrooms have demonstrated antiviral activity. Surthrival is currently offering 4 different package deals on their most effective immune-protecting supplement combinations. Each package contains a combination of colostrum, vitamin D3K2, and reishi or chaga extract. Also, 1 kilo and 2 kilo colostrum containers are also on sale. Remember, a strong immune system is always your best defense. Check out the lineup at surthrival.com. That's surthrival.com. Hey, you've been listening to the WildFed podcast, but have you seen the TV show? Season 1 of the WildFed TV show is 8 30-minute episodes, each of which features hunting, fishing, and foraging for wild foods, meals prepared by chefs and home cooks, and shared with friends and family that we hunt and gather with. If you love outdoor, adventure, or food TV, you've got to check out WildFed. Go to wild-fed.com to see the season and episode trailers. All 8 episodes are available to watch right now. This podcast was conceived as an adjunct to the TV show, so if you haven't watched the show, you are really missing out. Again, go over to wild-fed.com to see the season 1 trailer and individual trailers for all 8 episodes. People are probably going to be spending a lot more time indoors in the coming weeks, so this is a really great time to purchase a subscription and check out all 8 episodes of season 1 of WildFed. Again, that's wild-fed.com. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Today's interview is with Carter Heath, Regional Director for the New England chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation. I am very excited to be releasing this interview. Whether you're new to turkey hunting or a veteran that just loves talking turkey, this episode has everything you're going to need. Carter is, as you'll see, bilingual. The man speaks English, but he's fluent in turkey too. The spring turkey hunt was my introduction to the hunting lifestyle, and now that the snow is melting and the temperatures are warming up, it's starting to creep into my thoughts again. Now, I've been busy all week boiling off, which is an old Mainer way of saying that I'm boiling sap to make maple syrup. Walking through the sugar bush in the melting snow, carrying buckets of sap, and skimming the foam off the boiling sap in the evaporator pan are all activities that remind me the spring turkey hunt is soon to follow. I've already got a good sense of where I'm going to be hunting, and soon I'll be pulling my gear out to prepare for the season. My shotgun will get reconfigured from my duck hunting setup to my turkey gun configuration. That means adding front and rear sights, a sling, and a turkey choke. It means breaking out the turkey loads, my diaphragm calls, my hen and Jake decoys, and my ghillie suit. All stuff you'll be hearing about in this episode. Hopefully, it'll mean some fresh turkey meat on our table and in the freezer. In fact, I cooked turkey last night and I'm now down to the last of my stash. If you've been wanting to get started hunting turkeys yourself, you just found your beginner's guide. This podcast has nearly everything you need to know to get started, including ideas on finding mentors where you live. I think more than a few of our listeners will be harvesting their first birds this season as a result of the motivation they get from this episode. Now, next week, I'll be checking in with my good friend and botanist Arthur Hens, who'll be talking all about getting started with the wild foods lifestyle. You've no doubt heard him on the show before, seen him in the WildFed TV show, or just seen his work online. That's going to be a great show and just in time for the fast approaching spring foraging season. In the meantime, get ready to hear your new favorite turkey mentor, New England's regional director for the National Wild Turkey Federation, Carter Heath. Oh, a quick trigger warning. If you've got young kids at home, you may want to cover their ears. Some of the things he says in turkey might not be appropriate for all audiences. All right, well, I'm here with Carter Heath from the National Wild Turkey Federation. Thanks for coming all the way out to our place in Maine. Appreciate
Absolutely. That. It was a beautiful drive. I got to see some deer.
Did you see some deer?
I did.
What were they up to? Out on the field edges?
Yeah, it was a lot of does out midday feeding, no fawns, but I think this is probably the point where they're comfortable getting up and moving around now and grabbing a bite and heading back to the little ones.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And we got Grant Giuliano
Hey
here.
everybody, how's it going?
Running the sound.
Thanks for coming, Carter.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we were just joking with you. We're used to doing some long treks out to people, so when I heard you'd be willing to make the trip, I was quite excited about it.
Yeah.
Tell us about who you are and what your involvement with the National Wild Turkey Federation is.
Yeah, so I have been an ardent and invested hunter since I was like 9 years old. I grabbed a bow with my dad, had a great first experience, and it's the bug bit. And so everything to do with the outdoors, hunting, fishing, conservation, I'm really invested in it. I had spent about the last 19 years as a property surveyor, so I got to be out a lot, which was, kind of help sate some of that natural wanting to be outside. And while I was doing that, I was also a volunteer for the National Wild Turkey Federation. And I had kind of worked my way up and was ultimately chapter president for the Concord, New Hampshire chapter. And while I was doing that, I was also the state chapter president for the board of directors for New Hampshire, which was a great honor and it was wonderful to get to have that kind of volunteer hands-on. And then this opportunity came up last summer for me to become the regional director for the National Wild Turkey Federation here in New England.
Wow. And, so all of New England,
all of
states.
New England, yes.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so I'm very blessed with that. I was very excited to have this opportunity to now make my living working with people who are just as passionate as I am, because we have the best volunteers in the world, being able to make my living with turkeys, and not just turkeys, but the work that we do, and I'm sure we'll get into that, really benefits a lot of other creatures on the landscape.
Yeah, it's not just turkeys, right? Like creating habitat and
creating the
sustaining habitat is good for a lot of wildlife. I have a couple questions. First, before we go deeper into the Federation and your job there, did your survey work end in you being like, ooh, this is a good hunting spot?
I have always been sort of a shed antler junkie as well.
Oh, are you? Yeah.
Oh, big time, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So between shed antler hunting and at least finding people that I could ask permission to hunt on land and stuff, that sort of was a help. But what was also cool was I was able to, I'm not like a forager to the extent that you are, but I know I've got a pretty good forestry background, and so I'm very savvy with knowing what trees, what plants are what, and so you show me some hen of the woods or some black trumpets in the fall, I'm all over that. So
that's awesome.
So that's pretty cool stuff for me.
When you were 9 years old and getting started hunting, what was the situation with turkeys where you were?
Well, I come from New Hampshire, and back then that would have been early 80s, 81 actually. So back then you didn't see turkeys. Turkeys were not something that you would be really seeing. Now, by that point in New Hampshire, the reintroduction had started over more on the western side. I believe the first time I actually laid my eyes on a turkey, it was something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I was 15 years old maybe, and I came up over a knoll on a cut cornfield in a spring morning in the fog, and there were these 4 giant dinosaurs standing up in front of me.
I know exactly what you mean. I get frustrated sometimes when people say, like I've got a neighbor who, he always jokes his best turkey gun was a 1989 Ford Taurus.
Yeah.
I get so mad at him for
Right,
that.
right.
And he's just like, he loves to hunt, but he doesn't like to hunt turkeys. And I get so frustrated. Like, how can you not be entranced by this bird? Like you said, when you see it walking up, it's so gigantic on the landscape. And especially right at the crack of dawn when there's like mist and you see him come through there. It's like,
Right. Well, and one of the nice
Captures
things for me about turkey hunting is that it's so interactive. It's like having a 24-pound elk that just is responding to you, and you are communicating with another creature on their level and convincing them that you're affecting your will on them by knowing the skills, by knowing the calls, by knowing what to do, what not to do is oftentimes just as important. So
yeah, I mean, and there's no end to what you can learn.
Correct.
Right?
And that's something that is a big point with me, is hopefully I will never become an expert.
Yeah.
Because the journey for learning for me is so much fun.
Yeah.
I always learn something new each year about turkeys.
Yeah.
So I've been at it for a long time. Turkey hunting, I was probably starting off around 12 or 13 years old.
Okay.
And I'm 47 now. I was a guy who turkey hunted. Now I'm a turkey hunter. I hit a point probably 15 years ago that I'm like, whoa, this is really something I want to do. And then I became invested in it and started to really pay attention. And where before it had been, do I want to go trout fishing or do I want to go turkey hunting?
Yeah.
Now there's no doubt.
Yeah. That's funny. You remember yesterday, Grant, you had introduced me to this. We met this attorney, and he was asking me what was my favorite thing to hunt. And I just opened my mouth, and what came out was
turkey.
If I normally would tell people I really like hunting bears because I really like eating bears.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden I say turkeys, and then I'm just looking at myself sort of like
You're like, no, wait.
Where did that come from? But the passion I felt for it, and actually getting to take Grant out on his first turkey hunts has made me love it even more. Getting to
share that experience and do some mentoring, that is so rewarding. And that's another nice thing about turkey hunting is, for me, being involved in a turkey hunt on that level is every bit as rewarding as me actually being on the trigger.
Yeah.
Because you're sharing that experience with somebody, and it makes it a little more special.
Oh, seeing
When
them get a bird.
when I got my first turkeys, I think the smile on your face might
yeah.
have been bigger than on mine.
The look on your face was like, what do I do now? The look on my face was just like pure success.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn too. Tell us about the National Wild Turkey Federation. What's the mandate? What do you guys do?
Okay.
What have you done in the past, and where's it headed?
Okay. National Wild Turkey Federation started in 1973, and so we've been at it now for 46 years.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. We are a national organization, so there are chapters in just about every state. Our belief is that we are there to conserve the wild turkey and preserve our hunting heritage. And that's something that I get to talk to people about quite a bit. I got to talk to a drive time radio DJ not that long ago about the difference between conservation and preservation.
Yep.
And how, conservation is basically the wise use of our resources, and preservation is just
don't touch
we're
it.
protecting.
Leave no trace.
Right, leave no trace, we're not touching. And there's place for each, but when it comes to a resource so grand as the wild turkey, we want to make sure that resource is used as wisely as possible. So,
I want to explore that a little bit, just philosophically, because my background, having grown up not being a hunter, and didn't have a dad or an uncle or anybody who was going to introduce me to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I had a passion for the outdoors, which led me to do all these activities that later became really useful to me as a hunter.
Okay, yeah.
So a lot of, I'd learned to, hike and climb and canoe and, kayak and navigate and all those kind of things, which were mostly like, now I look back on them, I was like, I was just doing that for no reason, in a sense, because now I go out extractively.
Right.
But when I didn't, and I would have been more on that preservation side because I was raised up with the ethic of leave no trace, which I really see a place for, especially for hikers and backpackers and stuff. It really makes sense. There's so many people on the landscape. I get that. But at this point, I understand that, if we go back even, let's say we go back 1,000 years, right? We're way before industry. There are human beings like everywhere that's inhabitable on the planet. And we're integral to landscapes. And when you start to the idea of like pulling people out of landscapes, you actually lose a lot of habitat because humans by nature like make habitat.
Right.
So when you tell people to stay out of an area, you tend to get these kind of forests and these areas that like are less habitable to a lot of animals, right? So I think that's an interesting point that if we're not, if it's just preservation, I feel like I get how people think like we've done too much damage, we need to back off, and we do need to back off, but we don't need to back out completely, right? I think that's.
There is nothing more valuable in the landscape. Speaking in really broad terms, than young forest, and so by having kind of that combination of your mature stands, your young forest, and all that, you've got that diversity. You've got edges, and edges are where you're going to find a lot of your
everybody
naturally exactly
everybody's hanging out.
What do they say?
Edges.
10% of the critters or 90% of the critters are in 10% of the habitat.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because it used to be if I'd drive by a place and I'd seen that it was selectively cut, I would get this feeling like, oh man, it's like we just keep damaging the landscape.
Right.
Now I drive by it and I think, I'm hunting that this year.
That's going to be amazing, right. Because you get all that good regrowth, you get that the soil that's now exposed, and all the nutrients are just going to be coming up in the young, accessible.
So many forbs are coming up, things to eat. So, however, here's where I think I want to draw a distinction. Us out there hunting on the landscape in what's called, as somebody who hunts for meat, I think about, like, I sometimes struggle with the idea of, I often struggle with the idea of, like, it as a sport. Something about the language of that can kind of bother me a little bit, and I don't like it. I know that technically I fall under recreation, but I don't think of it as recreation for myself. I do think of it as, but I can go to the store, so it's not really subsistence either, right? But let's accept that term right now, recreation, and then drawing a distinction between the recreational hunt and the market hunt, which those were forces that were overly extractive and led to some major problems, right? Well, what happened to the wild turkey? Because that animal was extirpated from a lot of the state, and that wasn't recreational hunters going out in the spring and doing what we're doing. So what was going on there, and how did it get to that point? How bad did it get?
It got to the point where there were really no birds in the state.
And they were being hunted for food?
There were, between poor land management and no resource management, they were pretty much just gone extinct.
Was it? Do you know if it was a market-driven hunt, or was it a lot of habitat loss?
I believe it was a combination of both, because there was a drive for the birds as food at the time in the market.
It's a lot of
and there was
meat
no
on a turkey.
regulation.
What year are we talking?
Oh boy, I've seen several different numbers. I'd heard the number that turkeys had been absent from the state for about 150 years.
When you say the state, are you saying Maine specifically?
Maine, yeah.
But how about New Hampshire and Massachusetts?
Pretty similar story.
They were
on
driven
that.
back to where were they? Where did the birds come from that they brought in here to start the restoration? Do you?
I do. The restoration story kind of goes back to, from what I've been able to kind of piece together, about 1942, when game farm birds were released on an island, and it didn't take. And so up through the 60s, different fish and game clubs were releasing kind of a wild cross with more
that had some domestic
bird
bird. Yeah.
So they were technically domestic birds that didn't have any way to really pattern. They weren't connected.
Have the instincts to be on the landscape.
And so they didn't survive.
Okay.
And so come about 1977, Vermont gave 41 wild birds, and those were released in York and Elliott. And if you know anything
And for
about,
people listening, that's
in Maine,
southern
right,
Maine.
Southern Maine. Yep. And so you're looking at the blizzard of 78 and some pretty rough winters. So it really didn't fully take. About 1982, they ended up with about 33 birds from that York area, and they were released over in the Waldo County in Maine. And you get up to like 86, 87. There was a program where there would be a trap and transfer, which I don't know if your listeners, if you guys have ever heard this or seen this, it's pretty cool. Look it up on the internet. It's basically where turkeys are lured in an area that can support having some removed, and a large rocket net is sent up and over them. And then they're captured immediately, placed into cardboard boxes, and transported to other spots. So in this case, there were birds that came from Connecticut, about 70 birds. And that was about 1986. And they were released. And since then, from about 2001 to about 2012, they figure there have been around 800 or so birds that have been trapped and transferred within Maine to about 43 different locations. And so now we're at a point where the wild turkey is pretty prolific.
I mean, we sat down with Kelsey Sullivan. I don't know if you know him. He's the migratory and upland game bird specialist for Maine, and he told us, there's talk about increasing the bag limits on turkeys. So, I mean, I get both emotions on that. Part of me is like, ooh, yeah, that'd be great. And then part of me is like, oh, wait, careful, go slow. I know these estimates on how the population are kind of based on some sparse details. But it does tell you that the population is expanding and that it's in a good place.
Right, particularly in southern Maine. From what I understand, in all 16 counties in Maine, that there are birds. I know I've
Is there a hunting? Can you hunt all of the wildlife management districts in Maine for turkey? I know that some of them are restricted to one bird. Is there any districts where you can't?
The more of the northern ones, off the top of my head, I don't know.
I'm trying to picture up in like zone 1 and 2 up high in the state, because that's some thick country up there. I'd be surprised if there was much of a population of turkeys there.
I've seen birds up in Portage.
Okay. As you get down into the south of where you were talking about before, York and stuff like that, I mean, you just see these groups of birds, sometimes 40 birds in a field somewhere.
Right. Well, and now just to kind of give it some scale, in southern Maine, you have a lot of people. You have a lot of what ends up being great cover and great food sources, ergo bird feeders.
Yeah.
Because originally turkeys had been really focused around agriculture. You get the cut corn, the stubble, all the leftovers, manure piles. For those of you guys that don't know, manure piles kind of jokingly referred to.
Because they'll pick through that.
Right. That's the hot lunch program because a cow's digestive system is pretty rough. And so there will be a lot of leftover nutrient and seeds and stuff. So as agriculture kind of came down, a lot more people were moving in, putting in subdivisions and stuff, and with that became bird feeders.
Yeah.
So you'll get a lot of birds that are coming in hitting bird feeders, but they're not part of that flock that can be necessarily hunted.
Yeah.
Because
there's no access, or you're too close to houses.
And so unfortunately, turkeys sometimes get that bad rap because they're visible during the day, and they oftentimes they're smart enough to figure out, okay, I've got food here and nobody's been bothering me here. I kind of hang right out here between the swing set and the trampoline. And so there can be some sort of, some folks that don't always see that as a positive thing. Right?
Yeah, and those people are the ones who always frustrate me when you've been turkey hunting for a few days and you
come by my house.
Right. Yeah, they're always like, what's really? I mean, just you walk right up to them where I live. It's like, yeah, because no one hunts them there.
And again, that gives that kind of a perception that they're not the brightest thing.
Yeah,
when in
they're
fact,
easy to hunt. Right?
If you actively pursue them, they're pretty
they are
pretty
keen,
smart,
right?
pretty keen. Their senses. So and to kind of go into that. their sense of hearing and their eyesight is really tremendous. They have like a 270-degree field of view.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah, they can really, really pick out danger and movement.
And for people who this is the first time they're really learning about turkeys, I want to say this about them. The weakness of the turkey, in my mind, is that they don't smell very much. It seems like.
Right.
But their vision, like kind of like the opposite you're dealing with a deer. Like a deer's vision's not so good. He's picking up movement really well, but maybe doesn't see things super crisp. A turkey, I feel like it's like an eagle or something, right?
Yeah.
An earth eagle, I've heard them called before.
Earth eagle, yeah.
They see crisp and clear, and but they don't smell you, which is nice. So I love that about turkey season, that I'm not having to think about scent control.
Right.
But they got that great acuity and pretty good hearing too. Huh?
Very good hearing. Very, very good hearing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't chase them.
Well, and that no, exactly. But that hearing,
I've gotten away with a couple interesting hunts, but
that hearing has led to some of my greater lessons. And so you get something that either works for you or doesn't work for you, and that's reinforced. But just one of my little favorite tactics is, especially on a year like this, when there were a lot of hens and the toms, because we had such a rainy, cool year, I think the flocks kind of held a little together a little longer. And so by and large, it was an off season, if you want to do the air quotes on off. I know a lot of guys who are good turkey hunters that didn't get birds this year. Right. Just a little bit of leaf scratching. I've had birds flip out, gobble like crazy, 100 yards away.
So you're impersonating a bird,
impersonating a hen scratching. So what you're saying to that tom is, there's a hen over here, and she may or may not be interested in you.
Yep.
She's just not that into you, dude.
Something about a tom, he just can't take it if she's not interested, right?
Right. Well, and here's the whole thing. The way a tom is wired in his little noggin, he is the center of his own universe, and the hens are all supposed to go to him. And so by us getting all dressed up in camouflage and going out with turkey calls and trying to mimic the sounds of a lovesick hen, you're trying to make him go against his natural state of mind.
Yeah.
Him coming to you is what you're really trying to drive. And all right, and that's what's so fun about it.
I want to back up from here because I want to go into that.
Okay.
There's so much I want to talk about there. So I want to back up and let's go through some basics for people who aren't aware. Okay, so let's do some terminology. Who's the tom?
Okay.
Just people know.
Tom is an adult male bird. And you'll usually be able to tell him he's larger, darker tipped feathers, so he presents more shiny, iridescent black.
Yeah, sometimes especially if he puffs out, he looks black on his back.
Now they are, when you hear the term strutter, that's when they're displaying, and they will display all year, through the year, but most prevalent in the springtime during, if you're familiar with the whitetail rut, this is the turkey rut. Same sort of hormone driving force going on.
We don't really have a word for it, though, right? Unfortunately, people don't say that. I wish that people would say rut, or I wish we had a word that
was specific
to that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the tom is the male bird. He is the focus of our hunt in most springtime settings. He'll have a long beard.
All states that I know of are male birds, bearded birds in the spring.
Correct. And that reason is because the hens are being bred and then go into lay eggs.
And for listeners, most states regulate, that I know of at least, we regulate as bearded birds, and there are occasionally females with beards, and if you shoot one unbeknownst, it's still a legal bird because they're bearded, but the intention is to take male birds.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So tell us some of the other distinguishing features of this tom.
The tom will have a big old red, white, or blue head, and
it will just change colors like LED lights. I mean, he's coming in.
Did you get to see that on your hunt?
Yeah.
Oh, there's nothing like when you see what looks like a lit up light bulb coming up over the hill in the early morning, and then he starts getting mad, and it's changing different colors,
going red, white, blue, white.
It's like those
blue,
pops
red,
you get. That pop you get like from the ice cream truck.
Rocket pop.
The rocket pop. Those are the colors, right?
Yeah.
Those are the colors.
Exactly.
Those are the exact colors of it. Yeah, and for that reason, you always hear people saying, don't wear
red, white, or blue in
when
the
you're
turkey woods.
hunting.
Exactly. So like a good male turkey once you hit that 20-pound threshold, I've always kind of equated it to whitetail hunters as if you shoot a 20-pound turkey, you can kind of do a 10-time multiplier on that. You've kind of gotten the equivalent of a 200-pound buck. Congratulations, you know? And then if you get into more the beard and the spurs and all that, which I personally treasure only because it's part of the whole package. It's the enjoyment, it's the memory. But for me, it's all the stuff inside.
Yeah,
it's
right
the good stuff.
Right
I
on,
love that.
Right.
So then that kind of caps out with the tom.
Wait. I want to go a couple parts. So let's
Okay.
talk about those spurs, because
Spurs, yes.
those spurs on the back, so that's like a couple inches up from his back toe there.
Right. Yep.
He's got these like spikes that come off the back.
Yes.
And as he gets older, they get bigger.
Correct.
And I notice they start to hook after a little while.
Yep.
They're not particularly sharp to the touch, but when he's kicking around, you get your hand near those things, your arm, like sometimes when you go and he's flopping on the ground after you've got him down, man, they will just tear you up.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's what they use to fight other toms as protection. I've seen them neck wrap with other toms and then rear back on their tail feathers and just start gouging.
Just sort of sit back on his feathers.
I've shot turkeys that have had actual holes in their thighs.
Wow,
like
from
full on, and that's how you kind of say, oh, hey, I guess there's
they get
a
aggressive.
pretty good bird here.
And then that beard. So when you look at that, it is very clear what you're talking about. And what do people call it, like rope dragger or what other things you hear? You know, they've got this big. They're modified
feathers, exactly. Bristles that grow out of what's called a papilla on the center of the chest, kind of where all the feathers come together on the chest. If you were to look at it that way, that's where the beard grows. And when they are, and I'll drop this term, a jake, which is a year-old male bird, his beard is going to be about 3 to 4 inches long.
And just kind of poking straight out, usually.
Straight out. And you can tell the difference between a jake and a tom looking out there, because if that jake struts, his tail feathers haven't fully gone through their molt yet. And so he will have what's called a stepped fan, which is the first few feathers on each side going
it's like
up
a
towards
third
a crescent,
and a third
and a third
least.
are shorter, and then the very middle 5 feathers or so are quite a bit longer, and those are those adult feathers, and so he's working
got
on
that
molt.
kind of an incomplete tail fan.
So instead of on an adult tom, you've got that perfect crescent, that full 180 half circle.
Now, are those jakes? Are they? 'Cause a lot of times I'll come in and you'll see the bird strutting, and you're like, "Oh, it's a jake." Are they just being precocious, or will they breed hens?
They are sexually active.
They are breeding hens. So if they can find a way in,
Yes.
and they can convince her, because she seems kind of discerning. But if she can be convinced, they'll breed. Right. Okay.
Yep.
And then one of the things too I want to point out is that a lot of times I'll see, multiple toms together, and there'll be some jakes hanging on the edges too, and you shoot your tom, and then the other tom just come running in and just beat the crap out of him while he's on the ground.
Because he is in a submissive pose.
Finally, so the big man's down, and this is stomp him.
And this is the chance for us to
because I've walked right out to get my
dominance.
birds, and other toms and jakes will take a moment before they realize, like, maybe I should get out of here. You're like, dude, I'm standing right here with a shotgun in my hand, and you're just running at me still. Like, get out of here. Tempt me like that. So, okay, and then I never heard until last year the term Jenny.
Yes, and a Jenny would be the equivalent of the jake.
She's a
just
first-year
a
female.
First-year female.
Yeah.
And again, she is sexually viable. She's able to
Okay, so
lay.
she's reproductive in the first
she's
year.
reproductive first year. Yep.
Okay, so that, in other words, they're born in the late spring, right?
So that they're being ideally, you'd have a clutch born end of May, early June,
and then the following spring she can lay.
Yep.
Okay.
They mature pretty quickly.
An adult female is just a hen?
Is a hen. Yep. So you got your hen, your tom, your jake, and your Jenny.
One interesting thing I think is the scat, because you can tell them apart.
Yes,
and,
you can, and it's
really?
a valuable scouting tool.
You can tell all of them apart?
I didn't know that till I failed my guides test.
And that was one of the things I just did not know. They asked me that, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know." I passed recently, but yeah. So
I passed recently.
I did. I just want to clarify.
Hey, everybody.
But that was one of the things that I was like back. I remember getting leaving the test totally busted up, feeling terrible, and like driving, but Googling like female turkey scat.
Right. And it basically, not to gross anybody out, but a female turkey scat looks pretty similar to like a soft serve ice cream.
Yeah, just splat.
Yeah. Whereas a male bird scat looks like the shape of a J.
Yeah,
the letter J. It's a hook. And so the way to remember that is, if you're out scouting, J for Jake.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're going along and you're seeing some scratching in the leaves and, hey, there's some droppings. Ooh, hey, that's a fairly large size J. There's probably a pretty good tom in the area.
Okay.
So it's just a helpful tool.
And let's talk a little of the anatomy too. Well, maybe we talk about a hen. So a hen, she looks browner, and her head, she's got some feathers coming up the back of her head.
Does.
'Cause the head of the tom is just bald.
It's just caruncles and snood and
all those
dewlap and all the red,
thick, gnarly wattle material. So
Do they know what that snood is for?
That snood is just kind of an indicator. Just when he's all strutting, that snood can be 2-3 inches long, and when he's scared, it'll just pull right back and he'll boogie.
And that's like he's got some contractile muscle in there, so he can control that. Okay, so the snood hangs down from like kind of
it's a great
from
word.
like the forehead down over the beak, basically,
beak,
right? And it kind of seems to like fit right over that.
Yeah.
It's like a boy that's like
It's like a Justin Bieber haircut.
Right, yes.
Fling
the
that
Justin
thing
snood.
back. Oh, that's terrible. Any other distinguishing factors?
So the hen is going to be smaller.
Yeah.
She doesn't have the black tipped feathers, and her camouflage is really spectacular.
Yeah.
She is a buff brown, could be almost a light grayish, barred feathers on the the wings and stuff like normal. And her head, like you said, has a little row of feathers kind of going up the back of the neck. Her head is going to be more of a bluish gray. I've seen some hens with some pinker tones. But the remarkable thing about a hen is, as a mother, they're steadfast. As some of my times as a property surveyor, I've been walking along in the springtime, doing some recon, and look down, and there's just this shiny little eyeball staring back at me from almost where my boot is, and it's a hen. And this actually happened. She just hunkered right over that nest, and she never blinked. She never moved.
Wow.
And if I hadn't just picked up on the glint of her eye, I wouldn't have seen her.
Yeah.
And I would have stepped right on her.
I haven't come upon too many nests. Kelsey took us out, and he had radio tagged some hens, and so we were able to go see some nest sites.
Oh, very cool.
And but I mean, otherwise, there's something that I don't really ever run into. I never noticed them, so I mean, they're quite well hidden, right?
They do. They usually will choose spots that are kind of low with overhanging brush, and on a normal year, that's not a problem. If you get a year with a lot of like flooding rains and they're in a low area to begin with, they can lose nests to the cold, to the rain. I've heard pneumonia. I've heard, just the cold there's not enough.
Yeah.
So I've heard that they've lost some clutches in some bad weather years.
And for hunters, that's an interesting thing. That was something I also learned on our day out with Kelsey, was that because they're such an important prey species, both their eggs, their poults, and them as adults even, it's not uncommon for a female to lose her clutch.
Correct.
And then need to breed late season. So if you've missed, because I'm always like, for me, day one is like, if I can tag out on day one, I will, because I've got a busy year and I like to get into, there's a lot of foraging I do that time of year. And I like to usually that's going to start on a Monday.
Right.
And I know there can't be too many guys in the woods that day because they're at work. Yep. And I maximize that opportunity. And then as the days goes on, like if you can get it done by Friday, usually you're pretty good. By Saturday, Sunday, you got an army of guys are in the woods, right? Not just guys, obviously, but an army of people coming out into the woods. And now the turkeys are hip to what's going on. And then as the season goes on, you see it gets harder and harder for people to tag out. But then toward the end, you've got these hens running around that are trying to breed again because they want to lay another clutch. And that's why you'll see poults of radically different sizes, right?
Yes.
So you'll see one hen running around with these little poults, and then you'll see these other poults being the young
Poults are young.
hatchlings.
Yep.
You'll see birds that are 10 inches tall, and you'll see other birds that are
robin size, little fluff balls.
Right.
Yep,
So it seems like there's good opportunity for being that pretending you're that lovesick hen late in the season.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Walk us through a turkey's year or a flock's year. So that people get an understanding of why the spring is so important to the hunt, and then how the behavior of these birds changes as the year goes on.
Sure. Just starting in the spring, obviously that's the
start us in the winter.
You want to start winter?
Yeah, so that we can see how how this thing comes together.
Sure. You'll get what's called a winter flock, and typically you'll get the hen in spring will have her clutch, and then those birds will stay with her. And then so that'll be a flock. And then you'll have another flock adjacent.
But this could be
another
like
flock.
multiple hens with multiple.
Exactly. So you'll end up with generations of hens and poults all kind of coming together at a food source, whether it's an agricultural area, a horse barn area, a bird feeder area. So you'll have these winter flocks, oaks, beeches. You'll have these flocks come together, and they can be 80 to 100 birds or more. So they'll thrive. They'll work their way through the winter. Typically they'll if they run out of food, they'll get to points where they'll go to like seeps that melt out a little easier, and they'll find sensitive ferns, and they'll find different things they can browse on. They can actually live on the limb for almost 2 weeks without food. If they're going into the season well fed, like an average fall going into the winter, it's 12-ish days.
So they can go without food.
They can go without food.
Boy, I bet they had a hard year this year with no acorns, no
There was
beech
no
nuts.
mast.
Yeah, it was
very little mast.
A lot of snow, and I shot a bird this year with fully developed spurs, 3 beards. Wow, the longest one was 11 and a half or something like that. But he only weighed 18 pounds. And I was like, man, this is, I think, probably would have been a heavier bird if he had some food around, but there was nothing to eat this year, right? So I think they had a really lean year. But okay, so at that time, what are the Toms and Jakes doing?
The Toms and the Jakes will kind of be hanging around. They've established dominance through the fall coming in, and so they can be incorporated in these flocks, right? And so it's more of a matter of everybody wants to be at where the food is.
Yep.
So the food is the big driving factor.
And so they're setting aside a lot of the other kind of hierarchical components of their life, and then things start thawing, and what starts happening.
We get the thaw.
What's their day-to-day activity like in the winter?
Well, first of all, just one thing I want to throw out to everybody who might be new to all of this is turkeys fly up into trees every night. They fly up and roost, which is a great way to survive because they fly up, and most of the time that's where they're going to be in the morning.
They are clunky too, like a big old
Cannonball
B-52
with wings.
Yeah. You see birds sometimes even with really bad scars or wounds from where it looks like they've just impaled themselves on something.
I had a buddy who shot a tom, and it had I believe it was its left breast had about a 4-inch pine branch that had been like encapsulated
right. Encysted it or whatever.
Yeah.
So because when they fly into and out of the tree, it just looks like they're crashing through it, kind of.
Yeah, but
they fly, and so people know. They fly pretty well.
They can fly pretty fast.
Yeah.
They can get out of Dodge pretty quick.
Yeah, and they'll get some more altitude than I would expect. And I've seen them go. They seem to glide more than. Like once they get going,
and
they like to do long glides,
thing.
right? Yeah.
Why flap if they don't have to? Once they've got that altitude and they're moving, they can just carry that. So we're coming out of wintertime. They go up into the tree at night. They come down. Sometimes they may not come down. Like if you've got hard, crusty snow and they can't scratch down to get the maple seeds, the oak. The acorns and the beech nuts and anything that's down there.
If there's like 3 feet of snow on the ground, they're gonna dig down to get to that.
When it gets to that point, it becomes very, very difficult for them. That's why the high snow depths can be pretty damaging to a turkey flock. So they'll fly down. They'll find areas where they can get that solar warmth. The solar gain. They'll find a little sheltered area where then they'll just stand there for hours and just not burn calories and just take in that heat. And then, and then when it gets to be the evening, they'll fly back up and repeat.
Do the best they can.
Yeah. And they're not dummies. I mean, they can find food. They'll find it. If it's there, they'll get it. Then moving on to spring, as we kind of touched on a little bit, it's springtime is love time. It's the Turkey Rut, and you get into the whole wanting to procreate.
And at this point, all of those poults are Jake's and Jenny's.
Correct.
So now mom's not so responsible for them.
Right.
And what happens there? So they're starting to disperse, or they're staying with her?
The Jakes will, for genetic purposes, will typically spread and kind of
so they
work
push
elsewhere.
out.
Right,
yep.
Right. And your Toms are still kind of in that early spring, late winter flock, and they're keeping their dominance. This year, they didn't really break from those flocks. I saw a lot of times when there were multiple Toms with Jakes and hanging around with like 2 hens. And, so what that does, usually you'll have the flocks will break up, the Toms will kind of be here and there, and so you'll hear different gobbles, and that's another thing I want to talk about is the almighty gobble.
Yeah.
Around, like, if you're sitting there, you'll hear one over here, one over here, one over here.
The spring thunder.
Right, exactly. And so that's how you get to know where the Toms are. That's the tell.
So once their testosterone, the spring comes, their testosterone levels start coming up as they're getting ready to breed.
Correct.
And then they kind of start to be like, yo, I'm my own man. Like, I don't need to be around y'all. Like, and they start to like separate off, right? Or start to create. Becomes a dominance game.
Yes.
Which what I think is interesting about that is how it's not that way all year. It's just that way during that time frame, right? So,
well, there is some of that continues through the year.
Okay.
It's just that during that springtime, that's when it's really exacerbated. That's when it's like the big thing because they've got this certain amount of time to spread their genetics from, as early March on up to June.
Yeah.
I've seen birds mating in my travels and stuff. Yeah,
really?
As late as that. I've seen... and as far as strutting goes, strutting and gobbling is not just for the reproductive part. That's got a strong part in that dominance. I've come across birds on Thanksgiving Day. I was deer hunting, and I started hearing gobbles and fighting purrs.
Really?
So I'm like, I got to see what's going on here.
Yeah.
So I got a little closer, and it was 2 large flocks that were coming together. And I just happened to be there, lightning in a bottle, right place, right time, and got to watch this big Tom from this group who was the Dom bird over here and this big Tom over here. And they were gobbling and strutting and neck wrapping and fighting. And it was amazing.
Oh, that's
and
neat.
it was the 2 flocks. And they're going to come together. They're going to share the same real estate because that's where the food is.
Yeah.
But
they just have to kind of work out all
They have to get all that worked out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So
then, talk us through what's the rut like for all the animals involved.
It's the hens are going about feeding, doing their thing. They know that they're going to be bred, but
when they fly down in the morning, and a lot of times you hear them out there.
Yep.
So they're saying
when they're
ready,
they're
looking for a call back, right?
Yes, when
they're going to go to him.
Ready, they're going to go to him.
And actually, I should back up. The first thing that happens, so typically here, what it looks like is I'm sitting somewhere and it's dark, and then the sky starts to get some light in it, and I start hearing other things. I hear crows, I hear loons. Yep. But then eventually that gobble just comes crackling through the air first thing.
Love it.
And then like you were saying, sometimes it's here and then it ripples around. Another one gets, you hear them over here, you hear another one over there. And And so they're still up in the trees, though. They're
Yes.
doing this. They're letting everybody know where they're at. Is that what they're doing?
And yes, and that's a very social time. And that's why I love that break of the morning, the first, before the sun really comes up, you get that gray light. That's when they're all on Facebook. For example, that's Turkey Facebook. That is, I am here, I am here, I am here. You know, so you get all the different birds that kind of know. And because they grew up there, they know, okay, that's Lester over there. That's Leroy over there. You know, so it's not that they know who's who in the zoo.
Yeah.
And so that helps, you know, like I'm the dominant bird over him, but that guy, I don't want to gobble this morning because he just gobbled and not to personify him like that, but
I get you.
But they rely on that
certain
dominance,
behaviors are
that
kind of universal,
behavioral, right.
Hard not to relate to. Sometimes toms are up in trees and they've got hens up in the trees too, and other times they do not.
Right.
Right. So sometimes you see him fly down and he's alone, and other times he flies down, he's got 2, 3, 4 hens.
Right.
So what's going on there?
Typically, if you get a bird, usually like a satellite bird, he may not be the dominant one, and he may not have been able to be lucky enough to fly up with hens, because the dominant guy has got the hens, 3 hens with him, for example.
Is he going to breed those hens every day?
They will go through. Yeah, they'll go through that breeding process. A hen will end up going and laying an egg each day for 10 or 12 days.
Yeah.
And then just keep going through the cycle.
Yeah, because when you
actually
see inside her, like I've seen with hens that are road killed and, you know, I've salvaged early in the season. You got the big egg in there, and then each one behind it is sequentially smaller. So you see it's like, she's not like a Pez dispenser where they're all the same size in there, but they stagger
really
down
cool.
in size.
It really is. It's pretty amazing process.
You ever had a turkey egg?
I have not.
I would really love to, but that is not legal, Grant. So
right. So then moving like into the summertime, as you're getting that, you know, because turkeys are photoperiodistic, like deer and everything. So that's just a big long word that means that their behavioral pattern is dictated by the length of the amount of sunlight, the length of the day and everything. And so with their glandular system and releasing hormones in their body, you get that peak of the hormones in the spring, and then as it comes down, days are getting longer, and then you hit the kind of the equinox, and then you're getting into the summertime, and living is easy.
And you stop seeing them.
You stop seeing them.
Because now they're here, at least, a lot of the birds are going to be in fields for early in the day. Right. Before they disperse to go feed for the day, it's like the toms come down, they need somewhere open that they can display, right? So they can do their little dance, which I think of sometimes as the teacup ride when you go to like an amusement park. You know, the teacups spin around and go around. So you see them kind of just spinning around, doing this little like whirly-do dance with their wingtips down, right? And they're just braiding off those primary feathers and puffed up, and it's so goofy. So they're doing that in the fields, and they're there from let's say like dawn till, you know, the first few hours of the morning. And then they kind of disperse. But then generally, if you're out driving early in the morning, it's not hard to see this going on. Right. Then as things start greening up, you're seeing them less and less. And if you're in the woods, you start to run into them more. Now, are they? Is that just because the rut is winding down, or is it because there's more food now in the woods?
It's a combination, because as you're getting towards when the leaves come out, and that can be kind of different from year to year. This year was a pretty slow spring. You end up, you know, different food sources are becoming available. You know, you get your fields are getting taller, your hoppers are getting more, grasshoppers and crickets and food sources like that are starting to come on, dandelions. But you're also getting, like in a early leaf out, it's not necessarily good for turkey hunting, because what happens is you get now all these millions of little sound baffles, the leaves, and so that becomes a little more difficult to pinpoint a gobble or to know. That's right. And now, speaking of pinpointing, turkeys are typically, they're doing trig. Like they can pinpoint your sounds to within like 3 or 4 feet. Yeah. They know
When we did our hunt for the, episode 1, that hen came out and found exactly because you were throwing your call a little bit too. And it
5 days
right to
we
where
hunted. It was my first time hunting with a cameraman.
Okay.
So Grant's with me, and of course I've got him in a full ghillie suit, but he's got a camera, and I know he's got to do his thing. But I'm just picturing that lens just glinting away.
Definitely scared 1 or 2 turkeys away.
The episode ends with. Spoiler alert, the episode ends with me shooting 2 jakes because we spend 5 days, Tom's just running away because they're seeing that camera, and we camouflaged it as best we could, but it was really hard with 2 people for me the first time to figure that out. And it ends though with sort of, we've got this hen who's got a whole bunch of jakes with her, and I'm just calling, and boy, does she ever come right to the exact spot. Like I've had this happen a couple times. I've had experiences with where I have noticed that hens, I'm going to anthropomorphize it and see what I think it seems to be going on. If I was this hen, it looks like they get concerned about other hens. One story was I had a hen decoy out in a field, and there was a bunch of hens and no male birds around at the time. And there was a tom, he left. The hens were further away in the field, and they got so far away, like 200 yards away, that I sort of belly crawled out to grab my decoy and slink back into the woods. Well, one of them, they'll kind of do that lookout thing. One of them sees me grab that decoy and bring it in the woods. They all came right back over there and started putting all around that area like they wanted to know. I don't know. I mean, I must have looked like quite a predator crawling out and grabbing it. And it's like they saw me pull her in. They had already investigated that, but they did not like that, and they came over. And with this one, I'm calling, and that hen came over just like with what felt like concern about what was going on.
Fast.
Yeah, she came barreling in, and then all those jakes came in with her, which was like, oh, great, I'll take them, Yeah. So sometimes I feel like the hens care in a way that is different than what the tom is thinking about.
Well, you'll have a dominant hen that will be like the watchdog. And I've seen this before, especially with some of the larger winter flocks, bow hunting in late fall season. There was one particular episode where I had one flock that was very far away and another splinter flock that I was actually hunting, and they were all visible to each other. But the way the terrain was, I was able to get around one side of the hill so that I could hunt flock A. Well, what happened was flock B was far away, like 300 yards, and I thought, well, they won't be a matter. I'm only concerned with this flock. There's no way I can do anything with it.
Oops.
They putted and threw the alarm, and everybody left.
Really?
And so that they were watching
300 yards
from
too,
a
they
long
can hear that.
way. Oh yeah, their hearing is amazing.
Man, that's something.
Yeah.
That's something. Wow, they are really interesting in that way. Wow. Okay, so wait, how did we get there? What were we just talking about?
So we're summertime.
Okay.
For turkeys. The toms, they're doing their thing. This is basically conserve energy and get as much food in belly as possible.
And they kind of eat a pretty varied diet.
Very varied. Yeah, they'll eat amphibians. They'll eat frogs and snakes and grubs and worms. Right now is the key time for the poults, the young, to eat a lot of insect matter.
Okay.
A lot of bugs.
High
protein, quick growth.
Because they put on a pretty good amount of mass in that first year.
They do. They grow quickly. I actually just checked a quick trail camera yesterday and found a hen that's pretty distinctive, and she had 6 poults that were, on the 7th of June, they were little fluff balls. They were little guys. And then 4 days ago, they came back through, and they were significantly larger. They were quail sized. So the growth is
grasshoppers and worms.
It's good stuff. That's all. That's the diet right there.
So, all right, that kind of takes us through the year. Well,
and
actually,
then into fall.
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
And now fall is one of my favorite times to turkey hunt. I love spring.
So let's just clarify that for people too. So the iconic turkey hunt is the spring hunt.
Correct.
But then there's the fall hunt, which one thing I'd like to talk about is participation in that, because Why, Grant? Why are you laughing?
It's kind of like a Wild West hunt to me. It's just
I love the fall hunt.
Oh,
I mean, it's
I love
psychotic.
it.
The fall
I love
hunt,
it.
you can do things that are just, it's just so different. Anyway, I'm a marauder on the fall hunt. I'm a terrible person. But, because I just run in there, just run in blasting. It just, I don't know. But I like the fall hunt a lot. But I notice there's a lot less participation.
There is.
Why do so many people seem to not care about it? Is it because they love the activity of the spring hunt?
I think there's probably a misunderstanding that the only time to really hunt turkeys is the spring, because that's when everybody. It's tradition, and typically, I think a lot of people that turkey hunt enjoy the interaction.
Yeah.
That you call, they gobble. You call, they gobble.
Yeah.
So I mean that is addictive.
They must not like eating turkey though.
Well, and that's the thing is I love eating turkey.
Because I want four birds in my freezer,
So I've spoken to several springtime turkey hunters. I'm like, well, why don't you fall turkey hunt? Well, it's not that exciting. Well, I have had some really exciting fall hunts that involved calling to strutting, gobbling birds in September, late September.
Okay.
And now typically it's when you get like, my favorite time would be like a foggy, misty, 50, 55 degree morning. And I've had some outstanding hunts that was cutting at birds.
Wow.
And cutting, for those that you don't know, is an excited yelp that basically means, hey, there's something really cool going on over here. Yeah. Yep. Come on over. And have gotten birds fired up enough to gobble and strut in fall. So you're not really appealing to the sex drive, but you are challenging dominance.
Yeah, okay.
So you're working, you have to just kind of shift your mindset a little bit and use deeper, slower calling.
Okay.
Act like a Tom that's coming in and saying, no, I'm the guy now. And you can challenge.
I'm taking over.
There's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah.
And so you can absolutely work on that. Now, the more typical way is what you were talking about, is where you find a flock and you bust the flock in whichever way you see fit, whether it's running at them.
The state here allows dogs, and
Yes,
I assume that's why. I've never seen anyone who does this.
Hey, we'll get right back to the interview in a moment, but first, domesticated, civilized living restricts the natural movement of your human body, forcing you daily into chairs, cars, and rigidly defined pathways. But when we head out onto wild landscapes, we carry these dysfunctional, domesticated movement patterns with us. MoveNat is a natural movement system that trains you and your body to move like a human animal again. Are you interested in building natural movement skills that'll improve your physical capability in the field and in everyday life? MoveNat's new Level 1 Fundamentals e-course is structured to help you re-educate your body using practical, natural movements that enhance fitness, function, and physical capabilities, all from the convenience of your home. Learn to move the way nature intended. I attended MoveNat's Level 1 and 2 trainer certification courses a few years back and came away with practical knowledge and skills that I use every day and that have changed the way I train and move across the landscape, vastly improving my overall mobility, coordination, and fitness. This new e-course is movement-rich with clear instruction. Its progression-focused methodology takes you from restorative mobility exercises to challenging movements. All ability levels are welcomed and accounted for. Enroll now at wild-fed.com/MoveNat for instant access to the full e-course. Again, that's wild-fed.com/MoveNat, MoveNat. Again, wild-fed.com/MoveNat for instant access to the full e-course containing 16 classes designed to be followed over 4 weeks with specific and measurable movement goals for each week. The course is self-paced and you'll receive lifetime access. MoveNat. I can personally recommend it. It's a fitness and movement system that's designed for the wild. Now, back to the show.
You can use a dog in the fall.
Hunt only.
Wow,
Fall
that's
hunt
cool.
only. And what the dog is trained to do. And this is really big down like in the mid-coast. Mid-coast. It's
The
very
Mid-Atlantic
popular.
coast?
Mid-Atlantic, yes.
Okay, because I've been wondering, like, who does this? What is this thing?
It's a very
I've
popular
never
tradition
encountered it.
more down
So
south.
the dogs are trained to do what?
What kind of dog do they use?
Oh, boy. Different. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
It's not like a specific. It's like with bear hunting, you got like 3 or
Right,
4
you've got
breeds.
your-
People.
right.
Can
I'm
it
sure
be?
there is. I'm
Okay.
sure there is.
Okay. I'd like to find out.
So what you do is you have a little camo sack, and you take your dog, and they're trained to go out and break the flock in different directions. So like if you go running at a flock, there's a pretty good chance that depending on terrain and all that, all the birds are just going to go straight away from you and stay in kind of a one flock.
And for anybody who's ever chased turkeys, it's not that they run that fast, but it's like you can never close the distance.
Yeah.
Like if you can stay on them, but they're always 20, 30 yards ahead of you, and you cannot you can't pick up that distance. It's like impossible.
It's like they're teasing
I always
you.
joke with Grant that they look to me, they look like a Victorian era woman with one of those big skirts who lifts her skirt up so she can run with her legs. That's how they look when they run.
It's funny to think of those two things together, just teasing you like, oh,
can't
get closer.
And you just see those long legs tearing off, you know.
So the whole purpose is that you want to get an even break on the flock so that the flock goes in every direction.
Okay, yep.
And then as the hunter, you call your dog, put the dog, in the little camo little rucksack, and then you sit down and you wait, and then you start calling. And at that point, you're appealing to the birds because they're gregarious. They want to come back.
The female gathering the flock call.
Right. And so you're going to do what's called a kiki run, which is like a high-pitched 3-note whistle almost.
You got a call with you by any chance?
Nope. You can basically whistle it.
And that's like gathers everybody back together. And you're sitting there, against a tree maybe? Wow, he's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm half turkey. I am a turkey, so
what you eat.
Yeah. So what that does is that brings the flock back. So you've broken the flock, and then this is an opportunity to call birds, and you're communicating. They're just not coming back gobbling, but you will call them back. And at that point, then you can have a really selective, like, ooh, I want to shoot that one. I don't want to shoot. I'm gonna let that one's, not enough meat on it. I want to shoot that one over there. So.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then I imagine some states don't have a fall hunt, right? Or there's some controversy. Okay, let me back up. Maybe not controversy, but there are folks who feel like the fall hunt is not a good conservation practice or something. Or I've received that kind of feedback from people where they're like they feel like disdain for the fall hunt because it's an either sex hunt.
It is an either sex hunt, right? And so, for states that are looking to properly manage, as long as it falls within their biological,
basically, as long as it's not additive mortality, right?
Right.
Because I don't think it's like sometimes I want to say to you, like, do you have any idea how many turkeys fall prey to predators in the environment? The two birds that you take and the small number of fall hunters, these are within the numbers of birds that are going to be predated upon anyway.
Right.
But so you're very positive feeling about the fall. I like the fall hunt so much. It sounds like you like it too.
I enjoy it quite a bit. Now, oftentimes what the fall hunt is more of a hunt of opportunity, as they say. Yeah. So it's a bow hunter that might be out there hunting deer, and some turkeys walk by him, and he says, I got a turkey tag in my pocket. I think I'll shoot one. I personally enjoy it so much that I'll kind of structure my day. So I might be in a tree stand for deer in the morning, and then spend my mid-morning and afternoon turkey hunting in the fall, and then I'll go sit in a tree stand if I've got the luxury for deer in the evening. Yeah. Or if I know where birds are going to roost, I might set up in the morning.
Okay, similar to in the spring.
Similar in the spring, and just let them fly down.
I've never tried that.
And communicate.
Well,
try that.
When you took me out on my first hunt, the fall hunt, remember we came across that deer? And you're like, oh, if I had my bow with me, I could have shot that deer. Because you had to put your hands over your head and be like,
We're looking for turkeys. There's this deer, and I'm trying to get this deer to see me early, so it doesn't explode. I don't want it to blow because I know there's birds in there. So I'm waving my arms, and that deer runs off, and then we just see all these heads. Remember that? All those turkey heads.
Yep.
But what I liked about that, like that hunt, that was your first turkey hunt, and that was you belly crawled. Probably 40 yards, okay. Not 100 yards. Probably about 40 yards. But it took a long time through the grass. I like because there's like a spot. I like to spot and stalk turkeys. And for people who think you can't do that, you can definitely do that, especially if the ground's wet and kind of quiet.
If it's quiet,
you can spot and stalk turkeys.
And that goes back to the whole argument of, woodsmanship and in turkey hunting. I've been asked, what's that ratio of call ability and woodsmanship? And I kind of give it to woodsmanship. I mean, you got to be.
I'm not a great caller, but I get birds to come into me.
Right.
It's routinely that I'll hear something that I think is some atrocious person calling, and then I see it's a hen, and I'm like, because I'll be like, wow, dude, stop calling so much. It's a little much, everybody knows you're a dude. And then it's like, wow, it's a hen that just will not stop.
Exactly. I know exactly what you mean. And
so funny.
Yep, absolutely. I've seen I've seen hens that would not win a calling competition.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I feel like if you can be quiet in the woods and you can be still, I brought this turkey skull down because it's
that's cool.
I have been working on cleaning these skulls. This one's still got a pellet in the jaw right there.
No way.
It's kind of neat. But you look at that and it's like, okay, a good third of that skull is the eye socket at least, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all that eyeball. So like slinking through is a big game of like when their head's between trees, when they're turned the other way. And I didn't realize, like you just said, how far behind themselves they can see. But I've gotten away with a lot of it. And one of the things that I do in the fall that is probably a little bit cumbersome, but I do it anyway, is I squirrel hunt. I love squirrel hunting.
Yeah.
And so I'll be carrying a 22 with a shotgun slung on my back with my turkey loads because I routinely in the oaks I'll bump into turkeys. Especially if I haven't shot a squirrel for, say, it's been a half an hour, so the woods have quieted down, and then I'll hear some noises and it's turkeys coming through, and so I've gotten birds that way. Yep. But carrying two guns is a little awkward.
It's a little much. But
I don't like shooting squirrels with a shotgun. So
right.
But switching loads.
That rustling of the like a flock of 15, 20 birds is gonna make some noise on an oak flat, and so that's what I often will key in on. Not so much hearing the turkey calls in the fall, but I'll hear that rustling and you can tell the difference between turkeys feeding and a deer walking. Yeah, you can get that feel, so you can kind of set up your hunt based off of that.
And even if you haven't seen turkeys doing that, when you walk through the woods, you can see these areas where they've just cleared everything out, right digging down to the ground. I'd love to talk about the spring tactics for people who are new to it, and especially the different types of calls and equipment that people are carrying into the woods. So tell us lay out the classic spring turkey hunt, because there's an iconic one that people always try to do, and then there's what actually happens.
What really happens, right. The ideal would be to go out the night before, and again, I'm generalizing greatly. There are different folks that would say, "Oh, I don't do that," or but like romanticized version is you'd go out the evening before and you'd look out over the vast rolling fields and oak flats and wait to hear a bird gobble, because math says if he's going to fly up into his tree and he's gobbling from his tree, that's pretty much where he's going to be until first thing in the morning.
He's not going anywhere.
So you have a pretty good tactical advantage.
You go home, go to bed.
I've seen them move from roost tree to roost tree up.
You have?
I have seen that.
Shift.
Yep, I've seen that.
Do you any idea what the trigger for that was?
It could be predators on the ground. But
it wasn't you.
Nope. I've seen them. I have seen it before where it was me. Where we were actually coming out in the fall. We were helping a buddy drag a deer, and a flock of toms had roosted on the top of a hill, and we just crested the hill, and it was well after dark. We'd recovered a deer and coming out, and they completely alarm putted and flew,
left the trees, which
was very exciting because it was dark, and
we had
just had a conversation about geez, what's out here. So anyway, going back to that iconic turkey hunt, you'd it's called roosting a bird. You'd go out and you'd say, okay, this is where the tom that I would like to shoot in the morning. Yeah,
my buddy Mark calls it putting the birds to bed.
Putting the birds to bed. That's right. And so you'd go back dark.
So wait,
early.
One way though, so one way would be to see him do it.
Yep, you can
one
see
way
him
would
fly
be
up.
to shot gobble him, which I do. What do you like to shot gobble with?
My owl.
Okay, I do an owl too.
I do.
So
my
for
own
the
voice.
listener, basically, seems like just about any loud noise at night, right at like dusk, and you'll get a call back. I mean, because sometimes you get out of the car and you just slam the door of the car and the bird shot gobbles, or a dog down the street, or coyotes, or we've heard loons cause it.
Yep.
But if you get a crow or an owl call, you blast that out. Often what will happen is the tom's going to gobble in the tree, and you're going to be like, okay, he's somewhere in those 2-3 tall pines over there, or something like that.
And that's where you have to use your stereo listening skills to be able to kind of hone in and say, oh, yeah, it came from over there.
Okay.
And then, like you said, using kind of the math of saying, okay, well, I know that they like to roost in the tall, big old pines, or the big mast, heavy oaks. They like having that cover. Oh, they're probably in those pines.
Yeah.
So you'd go in early morning. And now something that I've had people ask me, well, aren't you afraid of making noise walking in the dark? Well, yes and no. You don't want to be talking, and you don't want to be making a whole lot of noise, but these are birds that have lived their whole life every single night going up in a tree, and they hear raccoons and deer and porcupines.
They're surprisingly
all night long.
It seems like they don't care that much. Yep. I've even where I've been like, oh, I set that decoy in a bad spot, and the light's coming up, but I really want to go move it. And I'll be like, this is stupid. I shouldn't do this. And I get away with it. And I think like, wow, until they come down, they seem to not be too invested in what's going on around them. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes too, I just want to say is like, I had this spring where I actually saw the tom fly up, and I was like, oh, this is too easy. I know exactly where, I know exactly what branch he is in. And then it's like, all right, see you in the morning, bro. I know where you're going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. However, the old term "roosted ain't roasted" often applies, because
roosted ain't roasted.
Despite your best efforts, oftentimes there's usually more that can go wrong with turkey hunting than can go right, as far as they've got their own way of doing things. So
okay, so let's pretend they're not doing that though, and they're doing exactly what
we're doing what we want them to do.
Yeah.
Ideally, you'd set up within 60 to 80 yards if you can get to their roost tree, and just sit down. And I personally like to sit and be quiet. And
do you bring a decoy?
I will. It depends on the situation.
Yep.
I'm not opposed to decoys. If I think that it'll benefit me, I'll use one. Absolutely.
I like that though. It's like you got your golf clubs and you're picking the one that makes sense. Like you got a big tool belt with turkey hunting.
Exactly.
And I think some people just try to repeat the formula all the time, but it's good to be strategic.
Yep. No. And a lot of it depends on what I've seen in the area. Sometimes a strutter, a small-bodied strutter with a Jake fan and a hen will work.
Yeah.
But then I've had some times where the birds will come right in and it's game over, done easy.
Yeah.
I've had other times where a mature tom will see that strutter with a Jake fan and just turn around and say, oh, I'm out of here.
Nothing to do with it.
I want nothing to do with it. And so
sometimes you don't know what happened to him the day before,
right,
though,
exactly.
too, right? Like he might have just had a bad experience going to a inanimate turkey.
Right.
right.
So you now we're, in this case, we've got our decoy set up. He will be taking advantage of his heightened view on the world up in his loft, up in his tree, and so he's taking it all in, and he'll look down and he'll say, okay, yeah, there's a hen right there, and he's looking at our decoy, and he may be that bird that didn't fly up with hens, so he would pitch right down and come right up to your decoy, and that would be the end of the hunt.
And let me ask you this: Do you wait till fly down before you call, or do you ever call while he's up in the tree?
Again, that's pretty situational. Because like I had an episode this spring where I was taking some folks out, and I knew exactly, it was one of those, I knew the limb that the birds were on. I was very confident with where they were, and I knew that where we were, there's no way they were going to be able to see us or know where we were, but we were within 80 yards of them. And so I started to do some soft tree calling. Not aggressive, not, really hardcore stuff. Just some soft, just a little bit. And once I got a response, I stopped and just let it be. And then as fly down started to happen, I started to pick up a little bit on the intensity. And the way I put it is, you're painting a picture with sound.
Yeah.
You're communicating what's going on. There's this whole act that's going on over here, and you're trying to convey it to that tom turkey so that he can follow it. And whether that is talking, saying, hey, I'm a saucy hen, I'm really pretty, you want to get over here, or the other part of that is the hang up. When that tom hangs up, one of my favorite things to do is shut right down and occasionally give what's called a purr, just a light purr. And I know you've probably done,
You're good at this, man, with no call in your mouth. I need a diaphragm call to make that sound.
No, I've been doing it a few years. At that and leaf scratching. Yeah. So at that point, what you've done is you're the prom queen that now says, yeah, you know what, I'm sick of you.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going to be over here doing my own thing. And oftentimes that will drive a tom crazy.
Yeah.
And when he stops gobbling is when I get the most ready and the most excited.
Okay.
Because
he's coming your way.
He's coming.
Sometimes.
And
that's one of the challenging things about turkey hunting in the spring is that you hear him and sometimes he just turns around and gobbles in the other direction, and it sounds like he's gone 100 yards away from you, but he's right in the same spot.
It does.
Or sometimes you don't hear him, and then all of a sudden he appears right in front of you, and you might think, oh, I'm just going to shift positions, and if you do, he's right there and you don't know it. And so when he's not calling, you are like having to imagine what he might be doing, you know?
Right. And that's where the woodsmanship and the experience comes into play. And there are clues that you can listen for that you might, as a new turkey hunter, you may not know about. One of them is one of my favorite sounds, other than the gobble, is the spit and drum.
Do it. Can you do it? You gotta be real close to hear that.
You feel it. You can the hairs, the cilia on the inside of your ears starts to vibrate, and it's. I had a hunt a few years ago where there was a horse corral, not that far away, and I started to hear. I knew there was a bird coming. I knew there was a bird in play, and every once in a while, one of the horses would kind of lean up against some of the fence and make a similar sound. Like close enough, like, am I hearing a spit and drum or am I hearing the horse?
Right.
And all of a sudden, I could hear crunch, 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 crunch. And then I knew he was like right there. But he had stopped gobbling quite a bit before. But he was coming in. He ended up coming in running.
Right to you. Yeah. That's the thing is I've tried to remind myself, like once I've called out and got a response, like he knows where I am, right? It's not like he's going to forget or anything like that. And, I try not to overdo it. Okay, so that's like the ideal is you've set up, you're leaned against your tree, you're camouflaged well, he flies down, comes right to you.
Yeah, that's like the ideal. Usually what happens, though, is he's got hens or he's got his own...
Do you shotgun hunt or just archery?
Both.
Okay.
Both. I like I said, I love to eat turkey. And so...
More about getting turkeys for you and then...
Well, and it depends on what I have for time and effort that I can put towards it.
For the new listener, you're in that spot, and let's do shotgun and let's do archery.
Yes.
So you're in that spot. He comes right in. He's in range. Describe how you target, and if we're talking shotgun, what gauge, what loads do you like?
Yes.
What is in range?
In range for me with a shotgun would be 35, 40 yards and in.
With the new loads, 40 yards is no problem, but 50 is like...
Yeah, and that's the big thing. Like when I'm doing a mentor program, we take special time to take each person out to the pit, to the range, to make sure you know exactly the capability of your weapon. Now, for me, I love both 20 gauge and 12 gauge. There are times when I'll be like, I just feel like taking my 20 gauge today. It's a little lighter, and I know what it's capable of. And like you said, some of the newer loads that are coming out, the tungsten super shot loads and stuff. And again, that's one of the points. Some people are for, some people are against. It's kind of like anything. There's always going to be folks that are going to try to hit the farther outer edges of it. For me, just
or the closer in too.
Right. For me personally, the whole turkey hunting thing is very wonderful, and I like the hunt of it. I like to call them. I love the woodsmanship. I like the communication back and forth, and so I've had hunts that have ended without taking a bird that have been extremely rewarding.
Yeah.
And it filed it away up in the noggin, and you know, can't eat that bird, but at the same time, it wasn't the way I wanted it to go.
I was getting kind of cocky with I shoot the heavy shot loads, and man, they have some knockdown power in the 12 gauge. But I was getting cocky, and I shot at that tom probably at 50 yards, and he flew right up and dropped a couple feathers on the ground and was gone. And that was my lesson. Okay, so now I'm like 40 yards is kind of the max of, because I'm like, now I realize if I set up a target, putting holes in paper at 50 yards that looks impressive, and you're like, okay, I get, you know, the spread isn't too bad. That doesn't mean that you're going to penetrate that. Their feathers are like an armor.
Right. And that's why, like, to kind of go back to what your question was, in the shotgun, you want to make a head shot. I always tell people to aim just about where the feathers meet the
right
red
around
head.
that wattle, right?
Right in there. If you put in your pattern there, you're going to disrupt all that central nervous system, and that'll
takes one pellet you get in there.
Pellet. That's
and the other thing is like, there's, especially if you're using non-lead, like if you're going to use steel or you're going to use tungsten, man, you bite down on a piece of one of those shot, you can break a tooth.
Right.
So obviously you don't want to be digging it out of the breast meat and digging feathers out of the breast meat.
Yeah, because they will drive, each pellet will drive that little piece of feather right in
there. Meat. Yep. And then the other thing is I like to eat heart, liver. Right. I mean, I don't want to lose that stuff.
Right.
So you start getting pellets into that, and it's such a mess.
So you want to go for that headshot. And another thing, little PSA, is shot selection is critical, because where turkeys are so gregarious, there's often times where you'll have 2 or 3, 4 birds all within 3 feet. And so depending on what your shotgun patterns, you do not want collateral damage.
Yeah, which is, it's true, because I have twice intentionally taken 2 birds with one shot, which tells you how easy it would be to accidentally take another bird. And not only is there an ethics problem there, you got yourself a legal problem at that point too, right?
Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
that's something to consider. That's a really good point. Okay, how about archery? I don't have any experience with that. Well, actually, can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, sure.
So there's popularity now of hunting behind the fan, reap hunts, and which I have had some awesome experiences. Some of my favorite turkey hunting experiences have been from behind a turkey fan, but I'm seeing guys now with 410 shotguns. Obviously in Maine, that's not legal here, but
it actually just now is.
Did they change it?
They did. They changed the shot size to 9. And they changed.
Because like I said, I just took the guides
410.
test the other day, and I had it all memorized. It's like it's a 10 through 20 gauge, and let's see, it was shot size 4 through 6, and less mixed loads 4 through 7.
Nice.
That's a
nice.
But
Good.
they've changed
Good.
it though.
Yeah.
So okay, interesting. So 410 is now any ethics issues there for you, or you feel okay about that?
410 is like a really tight pattern.
410 is a small. 410 is a gun that fits the smaller framed folks. A lot more kid friendly. And
you're not even measuring in gauge anymore. Now you're getting into
it's basically
like a
41 It's like a little bigger than a 40 caliber.
It's a very dainty little shell, man. It looks like a Virginia Slim 100 or something.
With the tungsten super shot and the constructed loads, there are people that are effectively killing turkeys like stone dead kinetic energy whop out at 30.
Really? With
yards.
a 410?
Yeah, with a 410.
Okay, wow.
And now, again, that's the kind of thing that it's on each person to use good judgment, and don't go in the woods if you don't know what your equipment is capable of, because you owe it to the animal's life to take it cleanly. And you don't want to just go out and, especially like with a kid, if you don't want to have a child's first experience in the woods be a negative experience, like wounding something. You want to make sure that. So that's my take on it. I think it's got great potential to help with new hunter recruitment.
Open things up
for smaller frame
point.
people, for women that might be a little skittish, physically smaller, that are not quite
12 gauge is a lot of put in somebody's hands. I mean, that is a lot of gun. The other thing to point out about shotguns is you can't just say like, oh, this is a great load, use this, because it's like you can have 3 or 4 of the same shotguns came off the exact same assembly line, and they pattern different with the same rounds.
Right.
And you got to it's weird with a shotgun because you have to find a load that your gun likes to use.
And that's a great way to put it, is you want to find what your ammo, barrel, and choke combination is going to be the most optimal. And for people that don't know, a choke is something that'll screw into the end of the shotgun barrel that is a constrictor. It basically will take the diameter of that barrel, and at the very last little bit, as that wad of pellets is coming out the end of the barrel, it will constrict it, and so that'll help keep that a tighter pattern, so that will carry together farther.
And the turkey choke is typically beyond the full choke. It's like tighter, right? It's one of the tighter
There's
patterns.
extra full, and
you can kind of think of it like the end of a hose. If you have like that modulation you can do that make it a tighter stream or a wider stream. Okay, so that's really interesting. I hadn't really definitely didn't know the 410 had been opened up here. So it seems like that must be part of a movement to kind of open the sport up or whatever.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And ultimately what we as an organization want to do is to have more people interested in hunting and kind of understand, kind of aligning with what you guys are doing, is how delicious turkey, for example, is. I mean, I'm a huge wild game enthusiast. Yeah. I love eating everything: bear, moose, deer, turkey. I mean, I love it all. But where turkey is something it's relatively easy to get into.
Yeah.
And it's rewarding because of an interaction.
Yeah.
And it's also very rewarding because it's great table fare.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really
not just the breast either.
No, exactly. And that's something too, and that's kind of how we got started.
I want to circle back to circle back to the food piece, because I want to make sure we talk about that because we become big fans of the
so you were
meat.
looking to kind of go along to
I want to hear about archery, because
archery,
a lot of times I hear about, and again, I haven't hunted turkeys with archery, but I have a good friend who prefers it. But I hear about a lot of wounded and lost birds, and so I'm curious about I just find the argument between bows and firearms so interesting. I'm a deep interest in ancient human hunting methods, and I think the bow has just served us for 60,000 years. You can't argue with that. But then I heard Steve Rinella say recently, he said, well, if you had to be put to death, would you prefer to be in front of a firing line or killed with archery equipment? And I was like, oh, shoot me, man. I don't. So anyway, so I'm curious about that, and I'm curious how you target and how you get clean kills. And I watched a video of you this morning. And there's that nice slow-mo where you hit that bird with the arrow, and what kind of broadheads do you like, etc.
Sure. First of all, again, there are so many different variables. My first turkey ever actually was with a bow. And it was a bow that I built. It was a long bow.
Oh, cool.
And so I used cedar shafts and Zwickey Eskimo tips and everything. And it was a fall bird. And it was a kind of a spot and stock combo call. Got the bird that was within my effective range.
You weren't in a blind?
No.
There's a lot of guys in blinds when they do it.
And I was able to draw back and shoot, and that bird died immediately.
That's
he
awesome.
slumped right there. And
what's your range there?
For that,
well, you had a long bow.
that was a long bow. 20 yards was my absolute max, but I practiced religiously.
And where are you hitting the bird?
In that case, I was aiming for the wing butt. So when I dressed that bird out, the heart, I'd basically taken that 2-blade broadhead and just taken the top of the aorta off.
That's what you want, though.
Yeah, and so that's why there was the instant drop.
Bled right out.
Yep. Now, a lot of people, a lot of archery turkey hunters will go for a headshot with a broadhead, and there are certain.
That's a tight shot.
It's a tough shot.
That's a head that's bobbing around.
Right.
So
well,
much.
one thing about that is it tends to minimize your wounding,
because you either hit it or you don't.
either hit it or you don't. Right. And so,
what do you think about these like guillotine style
Yeah.
broadheads? And for the listener, that is like that
it's
must be like a 3-inch, 4-inch long
it's
blade.
a huge cutting
and they just
diameter.
lop heads off
Yes.
with them.
Yeah. I personally haven't used them. I know folks that have used them successfully.
It's shocking when you see the slow-mo video. It's
It
it's
is.
gruesome, actually,
It
because you
is.
just got this
It is.
nub spurting blood
Yeah.
after, but it seems like it works.
I actually have been using broadheads that are made in New Hampshire.
Oh,
it's,
no
it's
kidding.
a company called Autolock.
Cool.
They're an expandable blade.
Yeah.
They're expandable broadhead. But the nice thing is there's a cutting surface that is already there. So there's very little kinetic energy lost. So on an animal like a turkey,
It's already cutting.
It's already cutting.
On impact.
I will, depending on the situation, I will either go for the wing butt, and I know with my current archery setup, I'm delivering a lot of good kinetic energy. Again, I keep
Through heavy arrows
for
or through
turkey.
through
Decently heavy arrows and a
Draw
good solid
weight.
cut on broadhead like that.
Yeah.
Plus I'm shooting about 65 pounds, and the way archery equipment is now, it's very efficient. So there's a lot of energy
Retained
that's
energy in
being
that arrow.
delivered, right? But there are times when I will go for that headshot.
Okay.
And again, it depends. If the bird is moving his head all around, it becomes pretty.
People do
pretty
shoot
difficult.
it right up the backside too.
There is, the Texas heart shot. That is, if you've got a bird that's strutting, there's no denying it. The way he's lined up, if he is dead away from you,
So that fan is the rear part of that
is the rear
fan.
part of that fan, and if you shoot at the base of that, you're going to drive that arrow
Right into his
all
heart.
the way up into the goodie basket.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, if you want to eat all the heart and liver, you've got a pretty good chance that you've just turned it to Jello.
Yeah.
So.
Got it. Okay, and then often people are in blinds, but so it's cool to hear.
Yeah, blind hunting is something I want to talk about as well, because when I was kind of detailing the perfect spring hunt, I will often hunt from a blind, particularly if
Like
I'm
a pop-up or
like a pop-up blind. If I am helping new folks, especially, and there's no shame in it. That is a great way to instruct people. To be able to
you can communicate with
a
them.
lot more effectively.
They
You
can
can get
move
away
and
with a little
fidget
movement
if they need
Yep.
to.
Yep.
And then the other thing is look, when in that spring hunt we were talking about, when you're sitting there set up, most of us have that shotgun rested on a knee.
Yes.
It's kind of pointed where we think that Tom's going to come, and the only thing that has to move is your trigger finger.
Correct.
But obviously, drawing an arrow back, drawing a bow
Right.
is
Getting
a
that
lot of
movement right. You're gonna have
so being in a blind, which is basically, if you haven't seen one, it's like a pop-up tent with windows and sometimes even shoot through
shoot
screen
through
windows.
screen.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense too for the mentoring. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a really big help because of what you said. You can communicate. You can help reinforce teachable moments. Why did that work? Why didn't that work? Oh, he saw us. Oh, he didn't see it. You can kind of
And you can do that's a
detail.
Tom, that's a Jake. You can
Exactly.
see this, you
Right.
can see that.
Right.
Really observe behavior and stuff like that.
Yep.
I'd love to talk a little bit about mentoring and getting folks into it. And I'll my own story is that my first hunt as an adult was some local guys that I met here in town, twin brothers, and crazy guys, and they they both would take me out. Sort of, I alternated with both of them, and brought me into the culture of it, and got me to my first toms. I think on the third day of our hunt, I got 2 toms.
Nice.
And I was in love with it. I was hooked on it, and I feel like now it's like very competitive when I go out with them, or when I go out on for opening day, because it's like everybody. You remember that day we came back, we had been hunting real hard, and we come back and get into my vehicle, and they're sitting under my windshield wiper is a big old long beard that they had driven by and left it on my windshield, man. But anyway, it's just they brought me into it through that, and that got me invested in hunting, and it only took one season for me to figure it out, and then the next year I was out on my own, and they showed me spots, and they showed me those core basic principles of it, and once you got it, it's like, okay, I think I can do this myself, and I've been able to hunt alone, since then, and obviously once you're out on your own, you're learning much more rapid rate, but it just seems like a very approachable hunt. The size of the animal is really manageable.
Yes.
The tactics are fun. The weather's good. It just seems like it's very easy. Like it's like one of the one of the hunts I would say if it's your first time going out, this is not a bad place to start.
Exactly. And so like to go back to the mentor part of things, what we've done in New Hampshire is we have what's called the Learn to Turkey Hunt Mentor Program, and that's in conjunction with New Hampshire Fish and Game and National Wild Turkey Federation. And it's been a very successful program. We've put, almost 200 people through that. People that would not have necessarily had the excuse to go turkey hunting, but they were intrigued by it, but intimidated by it. And so this was an opportunity to really kind of straighten that learning curve. And so what that was, the basis of that was we'd have a full day of classroom time. And that classroom was a day of soup to nuts turkey. It was
I would have loved to have
it
had
was
that.
biology, it was history,
Yeah.
it was calls, it was setups, it was woodsmanship, it was scouting. And so all the years and years and years of turkey hunting experience squished down into one day, run through a strainer, and fed to the people in the class.
That's great.
So then the next part of that was like what I'd started to allude to was the shotgun patterning and making sure that everybody knows what they're capable of. And, okay, your shotgun is good at 30 yards. I wouldn't go any past that. And so you have that in your mind. The last part, which is really exciting, which takes us kind of to a whole new level, is we actually pair up mentors with participants for the actual hunt.
That's so critical.
And so it's that last piece that gets people that are kind of like, yeah, it's a lot of information. Boy, I don't know. You get them out there, and then it's like
That's what I need.
opening
You
the
need somebody
candy
to
store.
hold your hand the first
Right.
time and walk you through it.
And there are so many components that you're not going to be able to pick up in a classroom that you're going to get sitting next to somebody up against a tree or in a blind. When to call, when you're calling too much, so you've got the voice of experience teaching.
Yeah.
So that's
I imagine that's
critical.
something is the National Wild Turkey Federation doing that in other states as well.
Yes.
I'm assuming
Yep,
this is
Vermont.
something. So for listeners nationally,
And
they can
even
find
Maine,
that.
we're starting to
Great.
get going on this.
That's awesome
So,
because I think that's really the key is, especially if you didn't grow up around it or around the culture, it's easy to take for granted if you got exposed to it through family or friends or whatever. But if you didn't, I thinking back, if I hadn't had that initial introduction, because actually once I got that, I felt comfortable to go. Now I'm comfortable to learn about an animal that I haven't hunted before and just go out and try myself.
Right.
It's great if I have a mentor, but if I don't, I'm less of, now I that taught me how to learn how.
Right.
So, but if I had to have done that on my own, I mean, I'm probably for you, Grant, right? I mean, I remember you running around with some very incorrect equipment. We won't have to lay that out here, but not really, But then when I brought you out and showed you, now it's like, okay, now you get it, right?
Right.
You had awesome
Absolutely.
fall hunt and then an awesome spring hunt this year.
And
too.
it does increase your capabilities and your confidence to do, expand and do other stuff. I mean, one of our greatest success stories is a woman named Monique, and she took to this mentor program. She's a grandmother. She wanted to get into hunting.
Oh,
she hadn't
cool.
really. She tried to deer hunt a little bit, and she went out this year and shot her 2 New Hampshire birds on her own.
Yeah.
Like she just went out and
That's
took what
awesome.
she'd learned in the past and applied it. And
Deer hunting can be a
she's
little
really,
slow, but like turkey hunting is exciting, and
Yes.
especially if you're into being mobile.
Yep.
Like, because I mean, I'm mobile. Like I like to turkey hunt like fast and quick and be moving around, and you can be in action basically all the time if you know. And that's, I can see how for somebody who maybe finds deer hunting, like especially sitting in a tree in the cold, it's just different. But what are you finding to be? So we didn't really go over equipment, but let's say you've got slate calls, you've got box calls, you've got mouth calls. What are you've got gobble calls, and even I think the state allows electronic calls here, right? What are you finding is people who are new to it are taking to?
A box call is typically given as like a beginner call.
It's really easy to manage.
It's easy to get a good tone out of it once you figure it out. It's not that I take exception with that, but I personally love to use a box call. I love all the calls that I have. It's like you said, it's like a tackle box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have, depending on the situation, depending on the circumstances, there might be times when a box call is what they want to hear. There might be times when a mouth call, a diaphragm call, is effective. It could be the difference between a sweet, clear sounding call and a raspy sounding call that could elicit the response you're looking for. One of my absolute favorite ways to turkey hunt is when you get into that second week, and like you were kind of alluding to earlier, and the birds have been called to a little more, they're a little more savvy, a little more educated. I keep wingbone calls in my vest.
Describe that for people so they know what you're talking about.
A wingbone call is probably one of the oldest types of ways to communicate with turkeys, and it's the 3 bones of the turkey wing, the radius, the ulna, and what would be the humerus, and they're fitted together so that the end, the large part, is the trumpet, and the smallest piece is the mouthpiece, and it's a suction call. And I personally I can do pretty much every call that I feel I need to do, but it's a different tone, it's a different sound. And so I've had birds that I've tried to communicate with a pot call, and they'll give me maybe a light courtesy gobble, like, okay, I'm over here. And then you break out the wing bone, and it's different. It's not something that you're going to get on a store shelf. And so I've had great response to that. Yeah. And especially after that second or third week.
That's interesting.
We should have told you to bring all your calls. Damn it.
Yeah, no.
I know.
We've been having success with this year with, I like a mouth call because it's hands-free.
It's hands-free.
What I like about
it.
it.
Oh, yeah.
But I carry a gobble call, which is a very awkward, it's like a...
Yep.
I always call it looks like a big black sex toy to me. That thing is so goofy. I feel like embarrassed carrying it around.
Right. Hey, sir, what's that?
Yeah, he's just shaking that thing around. But I have been having really good success with mouth calling over toward my decoy and then turning that gobble around. And because birds that won't move toward me, when they start to get jealous is what I feel like is going on. Right. And I'm like, hey, there's a Tom coming and he's hearing her. And then, boy, he'll start moving around. And we brought in 2 birds this year. Both your birds, I think, doing that, right?
Yeah, you're being a hen and then a gobbler.
I was playing both roles, and boy,
it worked well.
Fired up. So I like.
But you're doing that both with a diaphragm, right?
No, my gobble on the diaphragm's weak.
Oh, you had a.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you couldn't see it where you were sitting.
No.
Yeah, I've been practicing my gobble on the diaphragm for a while, but I'm not ready to take it out into the real world.
Yeah.
Okay, so box call for beginners is often...
Yeah, there's a push button call. It's like a little
that's
push
right.
pin call. They've all got their place. And it's.
Do you wear the full? So let's describe that vest too for people. Because I'm personally, I can't get with it, but I get it. But people wear this vest that's almost reminiscent of like a fly fisherman's vest, except that it often has somewhere between on the lighter side like a built-in butt pad, and on the other end like a full stadium chair
seat,
is like attached to the back. Yeah. And you just see people doing the whole yard sale, busting everything out. I got a friend who carries like a handkerchief that he has, a camouflage handkerchief that he's putting wood dowels in the ends.
Oh, and that's
he does the sound of a fly down with it. I mean, just all this stuff laid out at his feet. I just usually go out with like the gobble and the diaphragm. But do you wear this whole vest? How do you manage all your gear?
It depends on the weather. It depends on what I'm wanting to do. If it's rainy and cruddy out, I still want to go out, but I don't want to get a vastest, all my stuff. I'll take mouth calls and mouth calls and wing bones and stuff that can get wet and all that. But no, I am the guy that has the vest.
Got the full thing.
Got every place.
What kind of seat do you
every
got on that
pocket
thing?
has I've got the one that has the kickstand, so that you don't need
wherever you are.
Yep, you can just sit down.
I've had many times where that would be convenient, especially if you're just using a bush or something behind you.
Yes.
You can't.
And you want to have back cover, and again, just from a safety standpoint, always have back cover. Always know what's behind you, and ideally you'd set up on a tree that's wider than your shoulders.
You hear a lot about. You were just kind of touching on this, the safety issue. part of the issue is that you're making a call very often that could attract a hunter to you.
Correct. Right.
And then I mentioned, so that people know what I was talking about before, the reap style hunt, which I think is growing in popularity. And what I do is I keep a tail fan from one of my toms every year, and I use it in a few ways. I have crawled over 150 yards through a field on my belly toward a tom who's got hens with him, and I've had the hens come right up and investigate me and then be like, okay, whatever, he's great. And I turn that fan a little right, a little left, a little up, a little down, and I gobble, and I just crawl toward him, and sometimes I just get close enough that I can just drop it and shoot because I got the shotgun behind me. Other times I just lift that fan up and they just run right to me.
Right.
Sometimes if I need to walk from here to here and I'm worried they're going to see me, I'll just carry that fan right in front of me and use it as cover.
Right.
And that will work.
Yeah.
But you have people say to you, hey, that's really dangerous because what if somebody shoots you? How often does that kind of thing happen?
Statistic-wise, I don't know right off the top of my head, but
is it a problem?
It has happened. So, I mean, obviously you want to be very cognizant of the fact that by doing that, you're opening yourself up to the possibility that somebody could mistake you for a turkey. You always want to be, but that's with any part of this. You're making turkey sounds,
Yeah.
and so.
But what is the concern? The
people,
guy who shoots with no visual contact on it and they just blast at sounds? Because I think that sounds crazy. But then somebody was giving us the statistics on what happened, why Hunter Orange was instituted, and how dramatically it cut down on hunter casualties. And so that was a really real thing. But I just can't imagine like shooting at a sound. But
correct. Well, and that's because you're good ethical hunter and everything, and there are folks that get driven by adrenaline different ways and can lead to bad decisions and stuff. So
because I'm always like, I'm so obviously a dude behind a turkey fan. Like I'm like clearly a person, I am amazed. At first, I would really try to hide behind that fan. I have learned that it almost doesn't matter. Do you wear a ghillie suit or any 3D camo?
I don't do the ghillie only because I don't have one.
Okay, so I wear like a
full-on
jacket that goes over and a head ghillie. Yeah. And a couple things I want to say I've had happen. One was I was packing it up. And I had just put my backpack on, but my face is covered by the ghillie and the 3D. And I am unloading my shotgun. I have got the first shell pops into my hand, re-rack the slide. It's Benelli, so it's a semi-auto.
Yep.
I draw the bolt back a second time. I'm halfway through and I hear a putt and I freeze. And then I get surrounded by about maybe a dozen hens. They are walking all around me. They are nearly making physical contact with me. And I am just I've got a backpack and a gun in my hand. They just cannot figure out what I am, and they just spend a few minutes looking at me.
The curiosity
and then they
factor.
walk off, and it's like, okay, they can't tell I am a person. That blew my mind. That was a real wake-up call to me.
And your human form was kind of broken
up by the
ghillie. Yeah.
And then I have also found that, like this year I shot a bird. I was standing on a hill, and there was a kind of a rock wall on the crest to a field over it. And I'm just standing there holding the fan. I'm not even crouched or anything. And he just comes running at me, just full on. It's like I'm standing there just holding a fan. Like he's so driven by that iridescence maybe, or that shape of the fan. He just comes running at me. So I have found that I am not hiding as much behind that fan as I used to, which makes it hard for me to think like somebody's gonna shoot me.
Right.
But you just hear that all the time. So I don't want to be cavalier about it.
Right. Yeah. You want to have a sense about you. Like one of the things that I tell people in the mentor program, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with a hen calling, is if you hear hen talk in the woods, I personally will usually put my mindset that, okay, it's most likely another hunter, even though it very well may not be. That's where my mindset goes, and that's how I plan. I'll say, okay, that could be another hunter over there. Now, you can eliminate the possibility through different clues. If there's and then over there,
man, he's good at
it's
that.
all right there. You know that it's most likely a hen, and so you can proceed and do what you got to do. but you want to just keep that other hunter in mind. And hunting ethics is so important. And
I wonder if just being in a kind of a, well, I'm not like a younger generation. I'm 40 years old, but came into it so recently that I wonder. And as I told you before the show, I was a very conscientious type of person. I was a vegan. I mean, very conscientious about things. So I wonder if just in previous generations there was like less of that, like most of the people I know who are newer hunters, adult hunters, or the new generation of hunters are really careful with firearms. They really understand that you need to have a positive visual ID, know the background, know the foreground, all of those kind of things. I wonder if this is just from a different time when people are more casual about these things. Or...
Well, I mean, with more hunter ed, more awareness, more more involvement with the state game agencies and everything.
I think it's tightened
up a lot. That's tightened up, and hunting as a safe activity is really. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty high up on there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, here in Maine, if I remember right, the first turkey season was like 1986.
That's crazy.
So, it's a new thing. In other parts of the country, Missouri, it's been a lifestyle for generations, where here in the Northeast, it's a relatively new thing. Now, I'm meeting folks from all over New England, and different ages, different everything. And one of the things that just amazes me is there's a generation of young adults that have always just known turkeys on the landscape. They've always been here. And for me, it was something that growing up, if you saw a turkey, you put it in the newspaper. That was big news, and and now they're part of the landscape. Yeah.
That's one of those things that's so important about what you guys do, because it's like we don't want people to forget that. It's an important legacy.
Yes, and that reintroduction was one of the. It remains for this, especially this New England area, one of the greatest, things that has been done in game management. With the North American model of wildlife management, the whole reintroduction has been one of the greatest achievements.
Yeah, and then people, it's a great story for people to understand that hunters, and actually, it is truly broadened out to firearms enthusiasts too, whether they hunt or not. That the tax on that equipment.
Yes, P&R. Pittman Robertson.
Yeah, that it is people who hunt that have paid for these reintroductions. So I think sometimes what folks who don't hunt, or even let's say you have your people who are neutral, or you have your people who are against hunting, they feel that hunting led to the decline in animals, and it did, but it was because
it was unregulated,
and the non-hunters were the ones eating that meat. Right. So you had the market hunt. Correct. So the hunters would go out and clean the landscape of meat to sell it to non-hunters to eat, and now there's this sentiment amongst anti-hunters and non-hunters that it was hunters that did that. And it's like, well, everybody was involved in that. That was a market hunt. Right. But now it is hunters who are actually paying for and funding not just keeping the animals on the landscape, but all this biological field work that we all benefit from so much, right? And habitat restoration and open spaces and all those things. And I feel like the turkeys are a great way for that story to emerge for people, because I think that if let's say your average hiker, backpacker, kayaker, canoer, somebody who doesn't hunt but likes to enjoy the outdoors, outdoor recreator, I guess, if they understood that, I think there would be so much more respect for the hunters they encounter in the woods, right? Part of that is our job is being doing good PR.
Good
when
PR,
we're in the
good
woods.
stewardship.
Yeah, right. Representing hunting in a good way. But part of that is those folks understanding where this money's coming from. Because it's not coming from kayaks. It's not coming from canoes. Right, it's coming out of...
And as going back to the National Wild Turkey Federation, my job as a regional director is I'm in charge of volunteer relations and fundraising for what we do. And so the fundraising comes through a variety of ways, but one of them is like a hunting heritage banquet, which is the opportunity to get together and have a great meal and do gun raffles and auctions, and it's a fun night. And so each chapter, because I have several chapters throughout New England, we'll have one of those each year, and that's one of our primary ways that we can put good work back into each state and everything. And whether that's through hunting heritage programs like the mentor program, or whether it's working with matching dollars through the Fish and Wildlife for habitat projects.
Oh, cool.
And turkey studies. We're actually involved in a turkey study in Maine right now with some trap and transfer telemetry tracking for both disease and just basically kind of learning more about it.
Yeah, I mean, there feels like it's a field in which there's still so much to learn because they've only been on the landscape again for such a short period of time.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you was how quickly you see the female demographic of turkey hunters growing, because it appears to be growing explosively.
That's
a lot of female hunters now.
Wonderful thing, because if mama's gonna hunt, then the family is more inclined to follow. And so you're getting the full family involvement, and that's so critical, because if you have, say one child that is 13 years old and they're really jazzed up and excited about hunting, but they don't have any support at home, they don't have that network to take them out, they might go to get their hunter ed certificate, and then they just kind of might not have the follow-up on that. But if mom hunts, then you're more likely to say, okay, we're going to make a family weekend out of this, or we're going to do, let's do this. And so that growth is really, really critical.
And even not moms, like I see a lot of like boyfriend, girlfriend couples, husband, wife couples, where, you see them. I see a lot of social media now where you see it's like, just seems to be exploding. It seems really, it's pretty awesome.
Right. Now, my wife doesn't really hunt. She's very helpful. She's very invested in the wild turkey. She's loves eating it. She knows where her food comes from, and she loves that. She doesn't really want to hunt, but she loves going out with me turkey hunting. So she wants to be there as a spectator just because she finds it exciting. She finds it fun.
Yeah.
That's
funny because my wife doesn't hunt either, but again, like you said, incredibly supportive, loves that I do, and particularly loves the food. But she started to say to me this year, like, maybe I just want to go on the turkey hunt. I just kind of want to see it. It seems so interesting. And I think that probably in the spring she's going to be coming out, if not this fall. Nice. When you get your turkeys, how do you process them? How do you eat them?
Oh, my favorite. I am the waste not, want not kind of guy. I will usually skin a bird for my own use and then just take all the meat. And, I'll take the breast out, and then I'll just continue to work on through.
So with a knife, you're taking that dark meat?
You skin the bird, you don't pluck it?
I will skin it.
Okay,
Makes me feel better.
I have been plucking my birds, and then I don't even use the skin.
Right.
So I'm like, I do. I feed it to my dog, but I'm like, why am I plucking these birds? I feel like skinning them makes way more sense, but I have it in my head that there's somehow, for some reason, I shouldn't do it.
No, what I'll do is very easily, I've actually got a table in my garage that when it comes to be springtime, that table's ready, because I usually will teach a lot of people, hey, I just shot my first bird, I don't know what to do. And that's one of the biggest impediments, really, to people turkey hunting, is they're afraid they're actually going to get something and then have to deal with it, not know what to do with it. So that's another piece of that mentor program that we are very big on, is we will have, in this case, New Hampshire Fish and Game will keep a road-killed turkey or two in their freezer for these programs.
Great.
And so I will actually be able to go through the whole process with the classroom. That's part of the deal, is going through and valuing each part of that turkey. And so
for a lot of people too, what's nice about it is once you show them, it's like, we've done this every year at Thanksgiving.
Exactly.
Or I've butchered tons of cut up tons of chickens at home or whatever.
Yep. And you will notice that everything is in a muscle group. The back and the thighs and the legs and everything, it's all right there.
It comes apart like Legos.
It does, exactly. It comes apart like Legos. I like that. Yeah. And like with wings, the wings, I don't personally have the time to make wing bone calls, but I have several really good friends that do.
Like taking that project on.
And so I don't waste anything. Yeah. I can't stand the thought of taking a life and then not using everything. And that's something that I've taught my son. And it kind of goes back to the value of life, and and to use the T word, trophy, everything that I am going to pull the trigger on is going to be a trophy to me, whether it's a Jake, whether it's a massive Tom, whether it's a spike buck, whether it's an 8-pointer, you know, if the circumstance fits, that's where I want to be. That's the hunt. This is going to work. Then that's my status of trophy. It doesn't matter for anybody else. I don't care. I'm going to have a full belly and a full freezer, and my family's going to eat well. You know, as long as I'm ethical and using good sportsmanship and morals and everything. So, but
so you take those breasts off.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And then obviously the wings and thighs, they kind of separate off nicely.
Yep.
Do you try? You've got this carcass. Are you trying to get any of the meat off of that, or what do you do?
Yeah.
With that?
If I can, what I'll do is I'll, you know, like you get the heart and the liver and stuff like that.
You use the gizzards.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're fun to eat.
Fried up and.
Grants were weird last year, but I thought it was a fluke. What happened there?
They were yellow?
Kind of poopy.
They were a little poopy.
No.
I think they got some poop on them.
It can happen.
There was a little poopy flavor, but usually they're quite good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hearts, and then I mean, I
I
eating
feel like
liver.
the cavity of the bird is like always kind of smelly.
Stinky.
It's a stink. Yeah.
Their intestines.
I don't like to
everything.
make stock out of the carcass. I do it out of the. I'll use the wings or something like that. But my dog will eat the carcass. But it is a stinky carcass.
Yeah.
Will you make stock out of the bones?
I have. I will. It depends on you know, what I've got for freezer space. You know, there's sometimes what I'll try to just strip as much as I possibly can off. You know.
What do you do with thighs?
Oh, I've got all kinds of different. Like one thing I love to do is slow cook because turkeys are always on their legs.
Yeah,
they're
tough.
They are tough, and some people will just dismiss that and say, "Oh yeah, you know, well, you know, I'll just breast it out and call it good." And I personally think it's great protein right there and
flavorful meat too.
amazing.
Dark meat is flavorful.
It is. And so what I
you'll
like to do is
braise it.
crock pot,
Yeah.
braise, the Instapot kind of stuff. You know,
Let that meat soften.
let it
right up.
soften right down, strip it, shred it.
Yeah, because it's when you pull it off those tendons, boy, they're like
like
knife blades. Yeah,
that's
it's
Freddy
incredible.
Krueger. Right
yeah,
there,
that's what it
you
looks
know?
like.
Yeah.
It looks like Freddy's
It
glove
does,
when you
it
take
does.
it off.
So once I have that nice shredded turkey meat, there's so many things you can do. Pulled turkey, sliders.
Yeah.
You can do empanadas. You can do enchiladas.
Somebody made
tacos.
Tom Olles recently. For
Tom
me, so-
Olles, I love it.
They're great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's cool that you do that. Yeah, I have stripped it all off of there and ground it and made burger meat out of it, which is also great. And I've smoked legs a few times.
Yep.
That was fun.
It's all right,
It's fun
you
to
know.
eat. It's holding a big turkey leg.
Yeah, it's just very
You
medieval.
just got to be careful because you will cut your mouth all to
On
pieces.
those
on
blades.
those
Yeah,
tendons.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, we had worked with a chef in town here for the episode of the show that we made, and he really wanted to only work with the dark meat, and so he pressure cooked it all off.
Yep.
He really wanted the necks, and I was like, bro, the neck has just got pellets all through it.
Right.
That's
at that point,
unfortunately not
it's-
salvageable.
Yeah, there's so much bloodshot and pellet that
Yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
like.
But do you? So you take your beards, you take your spurs. You ever keep skulls? Have you ever been able to do that?
I have not.
This is the only one I've been able to
That's-
do because they
that's-
typically have so many holes in them.
Right.
But.
Now, a friend of mine had made a wing bone call at one point, and he incorporated the skull into the trumpet end.
Oh, that must have
It
been
was
cool.
really
Well,
awesome.
it must have been
really
beautiful.
awesome. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the whole culture of turkey hunting is amazing. Tell us about becoming a member of. Anything more on food, Grant? Before I jump off that.
Not that I can think of.
Yeah. Okay. Do you do anything with feathers, anything like that? You keep fans? Anything?
I do keep fans, and the process that I do is very, very simple, and I show people all the time. A little borax. There's one gland called the uropygeal gland that's their preen, and that's what keeps their feathers shiny, and it's their source of
They
vitamins.
grab oil out of that. And
They
then
grab
clean their feathers with it.
and that's right at the base of the tail. And so if you mount a fan and don't take that out, there's the potential because it's a grease sack. It's
Yeah.
basically an oily little sack. So I'll take that out. I'll skin up through, get as much fat out from
Much of
between
the
the
meat
feathers
off as you can
get
get.
total all that meat off.
So otherwise,
and
you end
then,
up with those beetles all through.
right,
your-
and then spread it and use borax on cardboard.
Okay, I
and
always
pin
use
it.
salt. So
I've always used. I kind of shy away from salt, only because I've had such success with borax.
Yeah, sure.
Ain't broke, don't fix.
Yeah, of
kind
course.
thing.
Yeah, no, I like it.
So I've always done a lot with that, and like one of the benefits of hunting with me on a mentor hunt is I will take that time.
Yeah.
So you shot your bird. Okay, let's go back to my garage, and I'll show you this whole thing.
Yeah.
And here you go. Now I've done this breast. Now you do this breast. And okay, this is the tail. Let's get this tail mounted up for you.
Yeah.
And so I don't like to waste a resource.
That tail fan is like so beautiful.
It is
I
beautiful.
I hate the idea of somebody getting rid of it. You know what I did this year? Because I think one of the big hindrances for people who come into hunting who didn't grow up hunting, they'll have a strong ethic about I want to use the whole animal. I hear that a lot. And I think that can sometimes, because it's such a noble thing, but it can be a hindrance because it can be so overwhelming until you've gone through several cycles of it that you learn how to use more parts every time. And this year I got really clear on how to make good stock out of the feet. You know, so I took the turkey feet after I'd cut my spurs. I took those feet and I blanched them and then right into an ice bath. So blanch in boiling water with tongs, right into an ice bath, and then the whole outer skin just peels off and the nails actually pop off.
Really?
And then it looks just like a red version of the same. Underneath is like still the sort of scaly look to the skin, but it's softer. And then you cook that down, you know, in a simmer it as a stock, and all that collagen comes out, and you end up with something that sets up like a jello
Did you use
mold.
a crock pot or?
Yeah, I use my crock pot. And
Fill it up?
you know what, less water than you're picturing. More like cover it. I did onions, carrots, celery, the whole kind of stock.
So you did the full soup stock.
Man, and
deal.
it's just some of the best. That is some of the best stock. But it took me a couple of years to figure out what to do with feet. And so I think if I had, you know, my dog will eat them or whatever. But I was trying to remind new people, like, hey, if there's parts you can't use yet, it's like something's going to eat it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Feed to my dog what I can, and then what I can't, I put out into a pile where, man, every kind of put it on a trail cam and everything's coming in is happy about it. So, but I think over time you learn how to utilize more and more until you have very
I will
waste.
often incorporate the feet and the spurs into a form of a mount.
Which
you know,
can be really
it
pretty.
depends. You know, if you've got a bird with some really dramatic spurs.
And their feet are so cool. I mean,
they
look
are.
like
They're
a velociraptor.
I was just yes, exactly.
So neat. But all right. So talk about becoming a member to the National Wild Turkey Federation. Why should people become a member? What are the benefits of that, etc.?
Sure.
What's it cost?
Well, a membership, a regular membership to join the National Wild Turkey Federation is $35. It's the kind of thing you can go online, nwtf.org, and get your membership. And typically, I think right now, if you get a $35 membership, you get a really nice knife. And pouch and case and stuff.
I always tell people, like, even if you don't hunt, if you care about, joining a group like this,
being involved
is a way to get some of your dollars out there actually supporting real habitat, real causes. And sometimes people want to give money to what they perceive to be an environmental group, and they end up giving money to like an anti-hunting, anti-access group who's going to keep you and exclude you from nature. So I love the idea of this because you're contributing to habitat and you're contributing to wildlife.
Right. And now with the success of the wild turkey, the National Wild Turkey Federation about 6.5 years ago started a new initiative. Not really a rebrand, but it's called Save the Habitat, Save the Hunt, which works right in line with our mission. And there's 3 parts to that. It was to conserve or enhance 4 million acres, and this is nationwide, of critical wildlife habitat, recruit 1.5 million hunters, and open access to 500,000 acres for additional hunting land.
Yeah.
So 6 years in, that 4 million that we're conserving or enhancing, that we are at like 2.9 million.
Yeah. Oh, great.
The 1.5 million hunters, we're at like 1.28, almost 1.38 million new hunters. And now that's
those are hunters buying licenses, buying equipment that goes into that Pittman-Robertson Act. So we're filling the coffers for the state's biological work.
And that's over the course of the entire country.
Awesome.
With the opening access, 6 years in, we blew away the 500,000.
Really?
We're at like 560,000.
Now, is this
right
public
now.
land access?
That's
is
land
this private land access?
Yep.
All of it.
Knocking.
Working with
We
landowners?
do a lot through NRCS, and
Who's that?
I can't remember the whole acronym right off. National Resource.
They're federal or
Yeah,
private?
they do a lot of forestry
Okay.
improvement work.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And so, we also believe that by keeping our forests and our waterways healthy, we're keeping turkeys, deer, bear, moose, all the other things. And again, a lot of the habitat work that we do benefits, as we talked earlier, a lot of other species.
Yeah, game and non-game.
Game and non-game, absolutely. We do a lot of pollinator work, which is
wow.
really important. Because
that ultimately trickles down as feed for
exactly. Well, it's that if you're keeping your fields and your everything, all your insects, your micro stuff healthy, and then that just keeps keeps on.
Yeah, so that's the other thing that I love about people contributing to something like this is that you have this trickle down. Mm-hmm. Even if it's like ultimately you're a bird watcher, it's like okay, well this is still going to benefit.
This is still going to benefit, right?
Yeah, right on.
So
how many members are there?
Nationwide, I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but I think we're over 200,000 members.
I'm definitely a member. Grant, you a member?
I'm not a member.
You're gonna have to become a member.
Yeah.
Well, last thing I want to ask you is just how's the future outlook? And I hear in some areas that there's some decline to the population, and I wonder if that's just because it's after a boom, or if that's something to be concerned about. Do you feel that after the successful reintroduction, are we at a place now where as long as everything keeps cruising like it is right now, are we on just a great track for the future? Do we have any big concerns? Like, how's the future outlook for not just turkey hunting, but for the turkeys themselves?
For the turkeys? There have been some places where there have been some, I don't know if they're cyclical declines or societal changes, because there's biological carrying capacity and social carrying capacity, and sometimes those don't always.
For people to understand, that's like
mesh.
Biological is like how much can the landscape support,
right?
And then social is like when do people and the animals start having interactions that are negative that lead to problems.
Right. And so sometimes you get a point where again turkeys are out in the daytime. So if they're eating on somebody's shrubs or eating on somebody's blueberries or whatever, it's going to be visible. Whereas, if a nighttime critter is doing it, it's out of sight, out of mind a little more.
Yeah. It's probably them damn turkeys.
That's right. Oh, they're sleeping in a tree. The turkeys are by and large doing really well. Like here in the Northeast, we're still on that boom. There are some folks that kind of almost see them as, not a positive thing. And again, that's kind of when you get into more of that areas where you can't use hunting as a sound biological tool to control that harvest. You get folks that have the bird feeder birds, and then they end up getting a little more brazen because it's a easy food source, and
no one's been hassling them.
You can't hassle them really.
But you feel like the outlook is good?
I do. I think that, given the past and kind of that trajectory, I think we're moving on in a good way.
Yeah, I hope so, man, because it's like the thing about it is like you got some people who imagine that you can't possibly love what you kill. But I mean,
it's such a dichotomy, isn't it?
Yeah, because
it's so true.
Head over heels in love with turkeys. Yep. I just so excited about them, and I'm also very eager to harvest them too. And so, but it's not mutually exclusive. And I care that turkey hunting has led me to caring that turkeys stay on this landscape.
Right.
That's really important to me now. Grant, anything you want to ask?
It's been a really fun conversation to have. I appreciate you coming out.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's bilingual. He speaks turkey.
Turkey, well. That's right. And if I can just throw this out there,
please,
if anybody that's listening to this is interested in getting involved in a chapter, getting involved more directly, other than just just buying a membership, which is awesome. Yeah. But if you're really looking to get some skin in the game and be part of what we're doing here in Maine, I'm always looking to get new chapters started. So Carter Heath, and my email is cheath@nwtf.net. Get in touch with me. Send me an email.
Yeah. Are you on Instagram?
I'm not. Okay. I am on Facebook. Carter Heath, guy with a turkey. That's me. Go figure. But so yeah, I'm always willing to talk to somebody, even if you just have questions about turkeys. You want to talk to me? Call me up. I'm always working.
You heard him say it.
I'm always on. This stuff is my passion. I make my living with my passion. Yeah, so that's so awesome. I'm blessed. So that's pretty cool.
Cool. Anywhere else you want to send people? Websites, anything like that? Social media?
Boy,
National Wild Turkey Federation. They can find that pretty easily.
Yep. Just look up NWTF, National Wild Turkey Federation.
You guys must be looking for volunteers and stuff like that all the time.
Always. And again, that's my job. Is I'm volunteer relation.
Okay. Because in the springtime, sometimes I'll see opportunities and these seem like good opportunities, especially if you're trying to learn about this hunt and you want to be involved in it. Is, I've seen requests for volunteers for the rocket netting, for instance, and for, doing whatever kind of field work. So it seems like there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved before the season so that they can learn a little bit, meet people, find some mentors, things like that.
And that's the great thing about the National Wild Turkey Federation. And this may come across sound a little hokey, but
be hokey.
It's like a family.
Promote it.
It really is. Like, you get in here and it's like, people now from all over the country. You can ask questions. Hey, what's it like in Missouri? What's, what do you guys do down in Florida?
Yeah.
And you, like right now, I could pick up the phone because of just meeting these people. And this was even as a volunteer. I could hunt pretty much if I had the time and the wherewithal. I could call up somebody and say, hey, I want to come out and let's do something. Yeah. Okay, sounds great. Yeah. Because you develop those relationships. Yeah. And that turkey hunting niche is so welcoming, and so it's just good stuff.
That's great. You want to take us out with some kind of turkey call?
That's all, folks.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.